Chapter 1918. Snatch. There was another planet far away from Celestial Armor Planet. More than 80% of the planet was a wasteland of yellow sand. Less than 20% of the planet was green. It could be said that the planet's environment was extremely harsh. One had to know that there was a huge difference between planets with life. They were not exactly the same. The true evaluation of a life-bearing planet was mainly based on the prosperity of the living beings on the planet. Generally, the more prosperous life on a planet with life, the more immortal chi the planet could provide to the continent floating on the planet. It could also increase the overall strength of the continent's cultivators. On the other hand, the more desolate the planet was, the more immortal chi could degenerate into vitality of extremely poor quality. Celestial Armor Planet in outer space was a living example. The vast celestial armor continent only had 3 demigods. There was not a single heavenly god. It could be said that it was one of the worst planets in the universe. In the universe, Celestial Armor Planet's situation would be unimaginable. Even the worst planets in the universe would not only have 3 demigods. They would have at least 2 demigods. As for powerful planets, they would have more than one heavenly god. Although heavenly gods had to refine planets, powerful planets could find an ordinary planet for their geniuses to refine and become heavenly gods. This would increase the strength of their own planet. The planet in front of them was more than 80% desert. It was called Yellow Dam Planet. Some of the cultivators who knew about the Yellow Pill Star knew that this Yellow Pill Star was formed by immigrants. More than 60 years ago, Chi-Chi, the ruler of the Long River Galaxy, suddenly came to the border and chose Celestial Armor Planet's predecessor, Celestial Armor Planet. After discussing with the heavenly gods of Celestial Armor Planet, the cultivators of Celestial Armor Planet migrated to Yellow Dam Planet. Although Celestial Armor Planet's foundation was not very good, it was much better than Yellow Dam Planet. When Celestial Armor Planet's immigrants first came to Yellow Dam Planet, they were full of complaints. However, Chi-Chi had attached great importance to the Celestial Armor Continent's cultivators who migrated to Celestial Armor Planet. No matter how dissatisfied the cultivators of Yellow Dam Planet were, they did not dare to make a move. They could only watch helplessly. What made them even angrier was that the cultivators who migrated to Zhou Dusk Planet had actually changed the name of Zhou Dusk Planet to Heavenly Armor Planet. As time went by, Sun Yan, the god of Sundam Planet, realized that Chi-Chi had been coming to the Heavenly Armor Planet less and less. In the last 60 years he had not come even once. Sun Yan boldly guessed that the Heavenly Armor Star had already been given the cold shoulder by Chi-Chi, and he also knew that their Huangdanqing's chance had come. However, the Heavenly Armor Planet was given to them by Chi-Chi, so Sun Yan naturally wouldn't snatch the Heavenly Armor Planet and migrate again. Therefore, not long after Moyan Wuxiang became a heavenly god, Sun Yan brought 9 demigods to the Heavenly Armor Continent and forcibly dug out all the resources and spiritual stones that they had left behind on the continent. Although Moyan Wuxiang was also a heavenly god, he hadn't been a heavenly god for long. At present, he was still no match for Sun Yan. Moreover, the demigods of Yellow Dam Planet were much more numerous than the Heavenly Armor Planet, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He could only allow the people of Yellow Dam Planet to dig out the resources of the Heavenly Armor Planet. It was reasonable that the resources of the Heavenly Armor Planet were created by the people of Yellow Dam Planet. Moreover, the reason that Sun Yan found was not wrong, so Moyan Wuxiang couldn't refute it. Originally, the cultivators of the Heavenly Armor Continent thought that Sun Yan would stop after making a ruckus. They didn't expect the people of Yellow Dam Planet to be restless again, secretly planning something. In the center of the Yellow Dam Continent on Yellow Dam Planet, there was a floating palace. The 2 demigods stepped on the astrolabe and entered the palace. They entered the depths of the palace, where a man in a yellow robe sat upright. "My lord, Moyan Wuxiang has left the Heavenly Armor Planet again. He should be planning to go to the main planet." The 2 demigods knelt on one knee and said respectfully. The man in the yellow robe was the heavenly god of Yellow Dam Planet, Sun Yan. At this moment Sun Yan's eyes flashed. He nodded and said, "This Moyan Wuxiang is smart. He actually thought of going to the main planet to earn divine stones, and use them to transform the Heavenly Armor Continent to restore the resources and spirit veins." My lord, we heard that Moyen Wuxiang is quite famous on the main planet's Duya Pavilion. Many heavenly gods on the main planet like to go to the Duya Pavilion to listen to Moyen Wuxiang play songs. One of the demigods didn't understand. Songs could cultivate one's temperament, but to the heavenly gods it was better than nothing. Even if Moyen Wuxiang could play songs, he wouldn't be pursued by so many heavenly gods on the main planet. They all knew that the heavenly gods on the main planet were extremely powerful. Even if they were of the same level, they were far more powerful than the heavenly gods on the remote planets. This kind of heavenly god powerhouse should be very self-disciplined. They couldn't understand why these heavenly gods were chasing after Moyen Wuxiang. Sun Yan's eyes were solemn as he said faintly, "You don't understand. Moyen Wuxiang's songs are not simple. I don't know why, but when this woman plays the guqin, it always has a strange effect of calming one's heart. In this tranquility, there is a thought-provoking feeling." Back then, Sun Yan had also been to the main planet's Duya Pavilion. He had been fortunate enough to hear Moyen Wuxiang play the guqin. At that time, he had been immersed in the wonderful feeling brought by the music. This kind of feeling was difficult to achieve, even if he meditated. It could be said that after experiencing this feeling, his originally tired mind was relaxed. On the road to the top, cultivators would always be confused and anxious. After cultivating for countless years, their hearts would already be tired. This kind of tiredness was a natural psychological effect formed by countless years of pursuing power. It was difficult to get rid of it with medicine or precious treasures. But Moyen Wuxiang's music could. That was why Moyen Wuxiang was so popular in the Duya Pavilion. Every time she played the guqin, there would be no empty seats. Panda of the Gold Sun Galaxy liked Moyen Wuxiang's music. At the same time, he also liked Moyen Wuxiang's temperament. That was why he went to Celestial Armor Planet to express his feelings. The two demigods did not seem to understand, and Sun Yan could not be bothered to continue explaining. Instead, he smiled coldly and said, "It's because of them that we've been forced to migrate to Yellow Dam Planet with such a harsh environment. Back then, the resources that we took away were originally ours. No matter what, these outsiders have to compensate us for being forced to leave our homes." "What do you mean?" The two demigods looked at each other. Moyen Wuxiang has earned a lot of god stones on the main planet over the years. Now that he has left the Heavenly Armor Planet, let's go take a look. It's only right that we take some god stones as compensation. Sun Yan smiled coldly and then said, "Call the other 7 out. After we go to Celestial Armor Planet and get the god stones, we will come back. Then, even if Moyen Wuxiang comes back, he can't do anything to Yellow Dam Planet." After a while, Sun Yan gathered the 9 demigods of Yellow Dam Planet. Then he took out his astrolabe and the 10 of them went to Celestial Armor Planet. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao weren't the only ones on Celestial Armor Planet's Guqin Mountain. There were also Ryuka's higher-ups, Yuan Hongwen, and Ji Chenyan, who represented the Central Continent's geniuses. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao had reached the level of true immortal. Yuan Hongwen's cultivation was very fast. He had reached the level of demigod. Ji Chenyan was also at the peak of true immortal. She was only half a step away from becoming a demigod. In Celestial Armor Planet, Yuan Hongwen's cultivation was the highest besides Moyen Wuxiang's. When Sun Yan brought the 9 demigods to Celestial Armor Planet, they attracted the attention of the people on Celestial Armor Planet. The people on Celestial Zither Mountain were also shocked. Damn it, it's Sun Yan and the others again. They took almost all the resources on Celestial Armor Planet. What are they doing here? Yuan Hongwen, who was cultivating on Celestial Zither Mountain, was shocked. He noticed Sun Yan and the others immediately. Then Ji Chenyan, Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and the others all noticed that something was wrong. They immediately came out of seclusion and gathered on a huge square on Celestial Zither Mountain. At this moment, Sun Yan and the others had landed on Celestial Zither Mountain. They stared coldly at Yuan Hongwen and the others. "Sun Yan, what is the meaning of this?" Seeing Sun Yan bring the 9 demigods over, Yuan Hongwen's heart sank. His face was a little pale. Sun Yan smiled faintly and said, "Hee, I came here today because I want you to give me some compensation. After all, you are occupying my planet. If you don't give me any compensation, Wouldn't that be unreasonable? Feng Xiao could not stand it. Sun Yan was shameless. She said coldly, "Last time, you sent people to take away all the resources on Celestial Armor Planet. Isn't that enough? Now you're here again. Sun Yan, do you have any shame?" Sun Yan's face fell. He said, "Those resources originally belonged to Celestial Armor Planet. How did they become yours? We took away something that belonged to us. Since it's compensation, how can you give us something that belongs to us as compensation? The so-called compensation should only count if you give us something that belongs to you." Yuan Hongwen's face was gloomy. He already knew what Sun Yan wanted. Sun Yan probably wanted the godstones that Moyan Wuxiang had earned over the years. Although Moyan Wuxiang had used most of the godstones to improve Celestial Armor Planet, he had accumulated a lot over the years. In order to speed up their cultivation, Moyan Wuxiang had even set up a spirit-gathering formation with the godstones to speed up their cultivation. It could be said that the godstones were very useful to the planet. Moyan Wuxiang had worked hard to earn them. There was no reason for him to take them out. Sun Yan saw the expressions of Yuan Hongwen and the others. He knew that they would not obediently hand them over. However, this time, he did not intend to make them hand them over voluntarily. He had come this time to rob them. "Haha, since it is inconvenient for you, I will take back the compensation that belongs to me." Chapter 1919. Reunion. In an instant, the Guqin mountain was enveloped by Sun Yan's power. Yuan Hongwen's pupils shrank, and his body stiffened. He could not move at all. Not only him, but the rest of the people in the Guqin mountain were in a similar situation. They were all confined by this terrifying power and could not move. At this moment, the strongest person in the Guqin mountain was Yuan Hongwen, but he was only a demigod. "Sun Yan, are you going to rob us?" Yuan Hongwen instantly understood Sun Yan's purpose. This guy had waited for Moyan Wuxiang to step out of the heavenly armor star, and then descended on the heavenly armor star. "What do you mean by rob? Didn't I say before that I was just asking for compensation? Since it's compensation, then it's what I Sun Yan deserve." Sun Yan sneered, and then slowly descended on the Guqin mountain. Sun Yan's shameless explanation immediately made Yuan Hongwen and the others gnash their teeth in hatred. Sun Yan actually used such a dignified reason to rob them. It was really shameless. After descending on the Guqin mountain, Sun Yan's powerful consciousness enveloped the entire Guqin mountain. Immediately, his eyes became serious, and even a little hot. Whoosh! Sun Yan instantly disappeared, and entered the depths of the Guqin mountain. When Sun Yan came out again, he was full of joy. "Let's go. I'm very satisfied with the compensation they gave this time. In the future, Huang Danqing and the Heavenly Armor Star don't owe each other anything." After saying that, Sun Yan left the Heavenly Armor Star with 9 demigods. At the same time, the suppression on Yuan Hongwen and the others disappeared. Then, Yuan Hongwen turned into a shadow and entered the depths of the Guqin mountain. When Yuan Hongwen came out again, his face was gloomy and he said, "That bastard Sun Yan, he opened the array formation that Wuxiang used to store divine stone, and all the 1,000 low-grade divine stone inside were taken away by Sun Yan." "What? Those are the divine stones that Wuxiang accumulated over the years. Sun Yan, that bastard." Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes were full of fire. Fortunately, Wuxiang carried the middle-grade divine stone with him. If even the middle-grade divine stone was taken by Sun Yan, we would have suffered a great loss, Yuan Hongwen said bitterly. Ji Chenyan, who had been silent, suddenly asked, "What should we do now?" Yuan Hongwen smiled bitterly and said, "Let's wait for Wuxiang to come back first. However, Huang Danqing's foundation is stronger than ours. If we meet force with force, we won't be Huang Danqing's opponent. I'm afraid we'll have to swallow this loss ourselves." The others all fell silent, especially Ji Chenyan. Her beautiful eyes were full of indignation. She was very clear that if their heavenly armor star was very powerful, Huang Danqing would not have bullied them like this. Huang Danqing. In the starry sky outside the heavenly armor planet, a black figure stood on a floating rock. An enormous consciousness enveloped the entire heavenly armor planet. The conversation between Yuan Hongwen and the others was clearly visible to this person's consciousness. Taking a closer look, It was a young man standing on the broken rock. His gaze towards the heavenly armor star was filled with nostalgia. Needless to say, this person was Zhuowen. Not long after Sun Yan left the heavenly armor planet, Zhuowen happened to arrive at the heavenly armor planet. With Zhuowen's enormous consciousness, it was easy for him to capture the conversation between Yuan Hongwen and the others on the Guqin mountain. He also knew what had happened just now. Thinking of this, he also knew that Huang Danxing and the others should have just left the heavenly armor planet. Therefore, his consciousness instantly radiated out and traversed through the starry sky. Now that Zhuowen's spirit had reached the middle stage of the divine realm, its power was comparable to that of a peak divine realm expert. The range of his consciousness was many times greater than that of Sun Yan, who was in the early stage of the divine realm. Not far from the heavenly armor planet, Sun Yan and the 9 demigods were riding on the astrolabe, leisurely heading towards Huang Danxing. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying divine sense enveloped them and firmly locked onto the group of 9. Sun Yan's body stiffened and he quickly stopped the astrolabe. The 9 demigods who were still on the astrolabe looked at Sun Yan in confusion. They did not understand why Sun Yan stopped. Sun Yan immediately bowed and said respectfully, "May I know which senior is nearby?" The 9 demigods reacted one after another. Only now did they realize that a soul consciousness as powerful as heaven's might had firmly locked onto their astrolabes. Their faces changed drastically as they hurriedly followed Sun Yan's lead. They didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. At this moment, Sun Yan did not dare to move. This consciousness was too terrifying and firmly locked onto him like shackles. He knew very well that if he acted rashly, he would immediately anger the owner of this consciousness. "Hand over everything and get out of my sight." A majestic voice came from afar and kept ringing in the ears of Sun Yan, and the others like countless muffled thunders. Sun Yan's face changed. He did not expect the owner of this consciousness to rob him on the way. Moreover, he was robbing a junior. Judging from the strength of this consciousness, Sun Yan guessed that the owner of this consciousness was either a late-stage or peak divine realm expert. Such an existence was considered a powerhouse even on the main star, and was not someone he, who was only in the early stage of the divine realm, could contend with. "Senior, let's talk nicely. Do you want something from me? If that's the case, Senior, please don't hesitate to ask. Junior will definitely hand over what Senior wants," Sun Yan asked tentatively. However, as soon as Sun Yan finished speaking, the consciousness suddenly became violent. Sun Yan only felt a buzzing sound in his head and a sweet taste in his throat. He was caught off guard and was hit by this consciousness attack. Sun Yan secretly cursed the despicable owner of this consciousness for launching a consciousness attack under such circumstances. However, he also knew that this consciousness had already shown mercy. If this consciousness had really attacked with full force, Sun Yan would have been seriously injured. "Are you still going to talk nonsense? I mean, leave everything you have and get out of my sight," the voice repeated again. Sun Yan did not dare to be negligent this time, and quickly took out his spiritual rings and handed them over. The 9 demigods beside him also took out their spiritual rings very consciously. "Also hand over the astrolabe under your feet." The voice spoke again and immediately caused Sun Yan and the others to be dissatisfied. Without the astrolabe, it was impossible for them to travel in the starry sky for too long. Sun Yan was fine as he was a divine realm expert and the yellow Dan star was not far away. He could use his star god power to return. However, the 9 demigods beside him could not fly in the starry sky for too long. "Sir." Just as Sun Yan was about to speak, the consciousness suddenly became terrifying. Sun Yan immediately swallowed the words that he wanted to say. He then rolled up his sleeves and escaped with the 9 demigods. After Sun Yan escaped, the consciousness did not pursue him. Instead, it looked around and after confirming that there was no one around, a figure quickly flew over. Zhuowen put away the 9 spiritual rings that were floating in the starry sky and then left the place. After a while, Zhuowen returned to the heavenly armor star and landed on the ancient Zither mountain. Originally, Yuan Hongwen and the others were still gathered in the square and sighing. Now that they suddenly saw someone land on the ancient Zither mountain, they all became nervous. They all thought that Sun Yan had returned. However, when they saw who it was, they were all stunned and immediately revealed a look of surprise. Zhuowen, my child, are you really back? Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao were the first to react and immediately went up to greet him. Yuan Hongwen and Ji Chunyan also came back to their senses and followed closely behind. Then, the Ryuka Long Xiangding and other Ryuka higher-ups, who were also related to Zhuowen, gathered around Zhuowen. Father, mother, grandfather. Zhuowen greeted Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Long Xiangding, who came up to greet him. There was a look of excitement in his eyes. He had stayed in the devourer larva for a full 60 years. After staying in such a dark place for so long, even Zhuowen felt lonely and lonely. Now that he saw his family and friends, Zhuowen naturally couldn't hide his excitement and joy. Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Long Xiangding quickly helped Zhuowen up. Among them, Feng Xiao held Zhuowen's hand and looked him up and down. She was so excited that she cried and hugged Zhuowen. Feeling Feng Xiao's warm embrace, Zhuowen's heart warmed and he gently patted Feng Xiao's shoulder. Yuan Hongwen originally wanted to speak, but seeing the scene of mother and son reunion in front of him, he swallowed back the words he wanted to say. However, Yuan Hongwen soon found something strange. He found that Zhuowen's aura was no longer that of a heavenly god, but a demigod, which shocked Yuan Hongwen. He remembered that when Zhuowen left the Long River Galaxy, he was already an early-stage heavenly god. And now, 60 years have passed, and Zhuowen was the disciple of the powerful Taiqing sect. He felt that Zhuowen's cultivation should be at the middle stage or late-stage heavenly god. How could he have regressed? Although he was puzzled, Yuan Hongwen didn't say anything. He knew that there must be something hidden here. Not only Yuan Hongwen but Ji Chunyan, Long Xiaotian, and the others also found that something was wrong. Although they couldn't see through Zhuowen's aura, they had seen heavenly gods before. Zhuowen's aura was definitely below that of a heavenly god. They estimated that he was only a demigod. Feng Xiao looked at Zhuowen and found that something was wrong. She looked at Zhuowen and her face changed slightly. She said, "Child, your cultivation has regressed?" Zhuowen's eyes flashed. From everyone's attitude, Zhuowen could see that they didn't know what had happened in the Taiqing immortal realm. Logically speaking, what he had done in the Taiqing immortal realm was enough to shock the entire Wuxia heavenly realm. Even if the Long River Galaxy was far away from the core of the heavenly realm, there should be some rumors. Thinking of this, Zhuowen felt that something was wrong. It seemed that someone had purposely blocked the news about the Taiqing immortal realm, and this person was most likely the true god sovereign of the Long River Galaxy, Qi. As for why Qi would do this, Zhuowen didn't need to think to guess. It was probably because Taiqing and Yuqing had stayed here for a while, which made the Long River Galaxy suddenly popular. Qi didn't want to attribute the reason to Zhuowen, so he blocked the news. At least, he didn't want the people of the Heavenly Armor continent to know about Zhuowen. Once they knew, they would definitely reveal the real reason. Chapter 1920. Insignia. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Mother and everyone else, I will explain everything to you when the time comes. However, now is not the time." Hearing Zhuowen's words, the others did not say anything. The Ryuka were Zhuowen's most ardent admirers, so they naturally obeyed Zhuowen's words. As for Yuan Hongwen and Ji Chunyan, after witnessing Zhuowen's terrifying strength, they were already in awe of Zhuowen. Naturally, they did not say anything. "Father, what about the blood splatter?" Zhuowen looked at Long Xiaotian. Before he left, he had given the blood splatter to Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian smiled bitterly and said, "Zhuowen, the blood splatter weapon spirit you gave me was too unique. It called itself Master Long, and did not stay on the heavenly armor planet for long before it left." What? He broke through the void and left? Zhuowen frowned slightly. He had told Xiaohei to wait for him on the heavenly armor planet. Why did it suddenly leave? Zhuowen knew Xiaohei's personality very well. He knew that Xiaohei would not leave without important matters. What happened? Zhuowen muttered to himself. He wanted to secretly sense Xiaohei's location, but he realized that his connection with Xiaohei was pitifully weak. Xiaohei no longer existed in his soul. Instead, it had become the weapon spirit of the blood splatter. Zhuowen had not even refined the blood splatter yet. He knew that this method of searching for Xiaohei would not work. Although his connection with Xiaohei was weak, he could still vaguely sense that Xiaohei was in the Long River Galaxy. However, He could not sense Xiaohei's exact location. Looks like I'll have to stay in the Long River Galaxy for a while. Zhuowen had a headache. Initially, he wanted to swallow the heavenly armor star into Devour's body. He understood clearly that as long as Devour didn't take in the energy of the planet could survive in his body, and the creatures inside wouldn't be affected. Now, Xiaohei had suddenly left Celestial Armor Planet. This made things difficult for Zhuowen. He had to stay in the Long River system for a while to find Xiaohei. Oh right, Wuxiang went to the Long River Galaxy's main planet? Why is she going there? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Feng Xiao nodded and said, Wuxiang had already advanced to the Divine Realm 20 years ago. She went to the main star mainly to earn Divine Stones. Feng Xiao explained everything that had happened in the past 60 years to Zhuowen. Especially when he heard that Sun Yan had shamelessly come to steal the resources of the Heavenly Armor continent, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, revealing a trace of killing intent. He thought that he had let Sun Yan and the others off too easily by robbing them of their spiritual rings. At the same time, he also knew that Moyan Wuxiang was in a private room on the main star, earning divine stones by playing music. However, Feng Xiao deliberately didn't mention anything about Panda. Although she knew that Zhuowen was a disciple of the Tai Ching sect, judging from the decline of Zhuowen's cultivation base, something must have happened to Zhuowen. She didn't want Zhuowen to worry about this matter. Besides, Zhuowen was only a demigod, and there was still a big gap between him and the Divine Realm. Panda's guards were all middle-stage Divine Realm experts, and he had the Gold Sun Galaxy as his backing. If she told him, with Zhuowen's character, he would probably take the initiative to look for Panda. However, Zhuowen was definitely not Panda's opponent, and it would make things worse. Hearing this, Zhuowen more or less knew the ins and outs of the matter. He also knew that Moyan Wuxiang usually only stayed on the main star for 10 days, so Zhuowen was relieved. He would wait for Moyan Wuxiang to come back on the Heavenly Armor Planet, and then look for Xiaohei. Ancient Zither Mountain, in an elegant attic, Zhuowen sat cross-legged, and there were 10 spiritual rings in front of him. There was a difference between the spiritual rings. Sun Yan's spiritual ring was obviously of a higher grade, and the space inside was much larger. What made Zhuowen satisfied was that there were divine stones in all 10 spiritual rings. There were about 5,000 divine stones in total, and he also found a middle-grade divine stone in Sun Yan's spiritual ring. Divine stones were naturally divided into different grades, and the division was the same as the spirit stones of the Heavenly Armor continent. They were divided into low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade, and top-grade. Low-grade divine stones were the lowest grade, and they were the most common divine stones in the heavenly domain, while top-grade divine stones were extremely rare. After Zhuowen put away the 5,000 low-grade divine stones and the middle-grade divine stone, he looked at Sun Yan's spiritual ring again. He had already checked the other 9 spiritual rings, and the things inside were useless to him, so he planned to give them to Long Xiaotian to distribute. However, there were quite a lot of things in Sun Yan's spiritual ring. Although there were no heavenly divine artifacts, Zhuowen found a bottle of mysterious yellow qi, a spiritual grass with a threatening purple light, and some other miscellaneous things. Although Zhuowen had never ventured into the starry sky, when he was in the Tai Ching immortal realm, he had always stayed in the golden depository. Other than comprehending void heaven-grade divine abilities, he would occasionally read some knowledge about the starry sky. Moreover, he had inherited the young Devour Sea of Knowledge, and the young Devour's memories were inherited from the young Devour. With the young Devour's countless years of experience, what had he not seen in the starry sky? First-grade divine herb, purple lucky grass. Zhuowen looked at the purple lucky grass in silence. The things in the starry sky were no longer spiritual herbs, but divine herbs. Even if it was a first-grade divine herb, it was still something that could only be found by chance, but not by searching for it. The purple lucky grass had a great effect. Although it was only a first-grade divine herb, it had the miraculous effect of recovering divine power. In a battle of the same level, as long as one had the purple lucky grass and swallowed it, one would be able to fight a protracted battle. As for the mysterious yellow qi, needless to say, it was also very useful to Zhuowen. However, the bottle of mysterious yellow qi in Sun Yan's spiritual ring was too small. If it was given to Zhuowen to cultivate the mysterious yellow immortal, He wouldn't even be able to advance to the first stage of the Hotian realm. It seems like I have to go to the main star to take a look for the mysterious yellow chi. It just so happens that Wuxiang is on the main star. Why don't I go there and take a look? Zhuowen put away the spiritual ring and walked out of the pavilion. He found Long Xiaotian and gave the spiritual rings of the 9 demigods beside Sun Yen to him. Then he took out 4,000 low-grade divine stones and gave them to Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian was a little surprised that Zhuowen took out so many spiritual rings and divine stones, but he wasn't surprised. After all, Zhuowen was a disciple of the Tai Ching sect. Such a small amount of divine stones shouldn't be a problem for Zhuowen. After exhorting a few more words, Zhuowen took out his astrolabe and left the heavenly armor star. The astrolabe he seized wasn't very fast. It was much slower than Zhuowen's own speed. It should be the lowest grade astrolabe. However, Zhuowen was only a demigod. If he traveled across the starry sky, wouldn't it be telling others that he was different from the rest? The main star of the Long River Galaxy was called the Long River Star. It was the core of the Long River Galaxy. The number of heavenly gods in the Long River Galaxy far exceeded the total number of heavenly gods in the other planets in the Long River Galaxy. Around the Long River Star, there were 4 secondary stars. These 4 secondary stars were dependent on the Long River Star. In the entire Long River Galaxy, their power was only below the Long River Star. This was because the 4 secondary stars each had a false true god. The false true god was a heavenly god whose cultivation had reached the limit of a heavenly god. They were only a hair's breadth away from becoming a true god. They were called false true gods. Although the false true gods on the 4 secondary stars weren't true gods, their strength was far beyond that of a peak heavenly god. It could be said that the 4 secondary stars had great prestige in the Long River Galaxy. All the heavenly gods were afraid of these 4 secondary stars. When Zhuowen first entered the Long River Star, he noticed the 4 secondary stars surrounding the Long River Star. However, he didn't pay much attention to them. The astrolabe's speed was quite fast. In about half a day, it was already close to the Long River Star. When Zhuowen was about to enter the Long River Star, he felt a stagnant feeling. Then his astrolabe couldn't help but retreat a few dozen feet before coming to a stop. What's going on? Zhuowen whispered in surprise. When he was with Tai Ching and Yu Qing, he didn't feel this hindrance. Haha, is this your first time in the Long River Star? It seems like you don't know the rules of the Long River Star at all. Suddenly, a hearty voice sounded. Behind Zhuowen, a ray of starlight flashed and appeared not far from him. In front of him was a man and a woman. The two of them were riding on the same astrolabe. Moreover, Zhuowen also noticed that the starlight on the surface of the astrolabe of the two people was much brighter than his astrolabe. It seemed like their astrolabes were of a higher grade than his. The man was tall and strong, and the woman was charming and pretty. However, what made Zhuowen uncomfortable was that the woman was like a sticky candy. She stuck to the man's side and made all kinds of intimate actions. She was like a cat in heat. Brother, please enlighten me. Zhuowen cupped his fists and asked. There is a powerful formation set up by an arcane divine master tens of thousands of feet away from the Long River Star. If you don't have a certificate to enter the Long River Star, you will be rejected by this formation. The man smiled. A formation set up by an arcane divine master. Zhuowen was shocked. He was a little glad that this formation wasn't an offensive formation. Otherwise, with the level of the arcane divine master's formation skills, Zhuowen would be in a difficult position. The reason why Tai Ching and Yu Qing could enter the Long River Star so easily was probably because their strength was too high. They didn't care about the formation here. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't feel anything at that time. Brother, please enlighten me. How can I get a certificate to enter the Long River Star? Zhuowen asked politely. The man laughed and immediately took out a badge from his spiritual ring and said, Brother, it is fate that we met. This badge is the certificate to enter the Long River Star. Coincidentally, I have an extra one. I will give it to you. Zhuowen was surprised. This was the first time he had met this person. It was a little unbelievable that this person would give him the certificate to enter the Long River Star. However, Zhuowen was in a hurry to enter the Long River Star. He didn't think too much and took the badge. Soon Zhuowen's eyes became sharp. However, this sharpness only lasted for a moment. The tall man also noticed Zhuowen's expression, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He smiled and asked, "Brother, is there a problem?" Chapter 1921. Tangji, so that's how it is. I'm Tangji, and she's my cultivation partner, Tanhaiba. The tall man took a deep look at Zhuowen, and then pointed to the woman beside him and introduced her. Zhuowen looked at the woman who was sticking to the tall man like a cat in heat. He felt that there was something strange about this woman, but he couldn't tell exactly what it was. Moreover, the cultivation of these two people wasn't too high. The tall man was an early-stage divine god, and the woman was only a demigod. I'm Long One. Zhuowen cupped his fists and said, "Let's go in first." Tangji pointed to the badge on his chest, and then stepped into the range of the Long River Star. He was not affected by the previous array at all. Zhuowen knew that Tangji was reminding him of the use of the badge. He sneered in his heart, but still wore the badge on his chest. Perhaps because he noticed that Zhuowen wore the badge, Tangji's smile grew wider, and his face became more enthusiastic. "Brother Long, the Long River Star doesn't have any land companion creatures. All the people on this planet are cultivators, and there are no mortals. I wonder why Brother Long has come to the Long River Star this time?" Tangji asked enthusiastically. "Hee. I came to the Long River Star this time for Miss Moyan Wuxiang of the Great Accord Pavilion. I heard that Miss Wuxiang's song is very magical. I also want to hear how magical it is," Zhuowen said with a faint smile. Tangji's eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, "So Brother Long has come for Miss Wuxiang of the Great Accord Pavilion. I'm familiar with the Great Accord Pavilion. It's in the main city of the Long River Star. Coincidentally, I have a residence in the main city. Why don't Brother Long come to my place as a guest, and let me play host?" Zhuowen sneered in his heart. He was sure that there was something wrong with Tangji. When he received the badge, he found that there was a divine sense imprint on the badge. As long as Zhuowen wore the badge, the owner of the divine sense imprint would be able to find the location of Zhuowen. This divine sense imprint was extremely obscure. Let alone a demigod, even an early-stage heavenly god cultivator, might not be able to detect it. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's spiritual sense was much stronger than the average divine realm expert. The moment he received the badge, he discovered the spiritual sense imprint within it. However, Zhuowen did not erase the spiritual consciousness imprint in the badge. He wanted to see what Tangji was planning. Moreover, he was indeed unfamiliar with the Long River Star. With Tangji leading the way, it would save him a lot of trouble. Of course, if this Tangji really had evil intentions towards him, Zhuowen wouldn't be afraid. Even though he hadn't advanced to the heavenly god realm yet, relying on his powerful divine sense and his young fleshly body, he wasn't even afraid of a mid-stage heavenly god. Even a late heavenly god might not be able to do anything to him, let alone a mere Tangji. Under Tangji's lead, the three of them quickly entered Long River Star's main city. Although the main city of Long River Star was magnificent, it paled in comparison to Zhuowen, who had seen the Taiching Wonderland. However, Zhuowen discovered that not all the cultivators in Long River Star's main city were above the heavenly god realm. Most of them were demigods, and there were even true immortals and heavenly immortals. However, these were the bottom rung of the main city. Many cultivators below the heavenly god realm, who didn't have any background, were basically doing heavy and dirty work in the main city. There was even a restaurant not far away, where the waiter who was enthusiastically shouting outside was a true immortal. It was the first time Zhuowen had seen such a scene, so his eyes revealed a strange look. Whether it was a true immortal or a demigod, in an ordinary continent, they were considered the pinnacle of existence. However, in Long River Star's main city, they were the bottom rung. This contrast caused quite a shock to Zhuowen. Although Tangji had been leading the way, he had been observing Zhuowen with his divine sense. After seeing the strange look on Zhuowen's face, he was even more certain that Zhuowen was just a rogue cultivator without any background. Not long after, Tangji led Zhuowen through a street, and arrived at a residence that was neither too big nor too small. Moreover, the surroundings of the residence were covered in formations that fluctuated quite a bit. It wasn't just this house. All the buildings in the main city were protected by a formation. The only difference was the strength of the formation. Brother Long, the land price in the main city is extremely expensive. Back then, I spent a lot of money to buy this house. When they arrived in front of his house, Tang Ji said proudly. Obviously, he was quite proud of being able to buy a house in the main city. Brother Tang, is the land price in the main city very expensive? If I may be so bold, may I ask Brother Tang how many divine stones you spent to purchase this residence? Zhuowen looked at Tang Ji's expression and naturally went along with it. Tang Ji smiled and waved his hand. He said, actually it's only 100,000 divine stones. This is just a relatively ordinary house. The real luxurious houses easily cost millions, or even tens of millions of divine stones. Speaking of luxurious houses, Tang Ji's expression was full of yearning. Obviously, he had a great desire for those luxurious houses in the main city. Zhuowen was stunned. He was surprised by the price of this house. Such a small place actually costs 100,000 divine stones. In Zhuowen's opinion, if this wasn't robbery, then what was? In Zhuowen's opinion, these residences were just places to stay. How could they be worth such a high price? Perhaps seeing Zhuowen's confusion, Tang Ji smiled and explained, Brother Long, there's something you don't know. The houses in the main city are different from those in other places. This is because all the buildings in the main city have powerful formations. These formations are all created by arcane masters. Every building will have 3 basic formations. They are the offensive formation, the defensive formation, and the most important one, the Great Convergence formation. The luxurious houses have more formations, and the Great Convergence formation is of a higher level. Hearing this, Zhuowen finally understood. He had heard of the Great Convergence formation before. This kind of formation could assist the cultivation of heavenly gods and true gods. It was said that the higher the level of the Great Convergence formation, the faster the cultivation speed. It could save a cultivator a lot of cultivation time. He knew that the price of land in the main city was so high not because of the location, but because of the formations in the houses. In particular, the Great Convergence formation was a necessary formation for cultivators above the heavenly god realm. This kind of formation could only be set up by divine arcane masters. Brother Tang, you're amazing. You're able to buy your own house in the main city at such a young age. Tan Haiba, who had been sticking to Tang Ji, said with admiration. Zhuowen shook his head. Whether it was the world of cultivators or earth, there would always be people who worshipped money. Brother Long, come in and have a seat. Zhuowen didn't reject Tang Ji's invitation. He followed Tang Ji into the house after removing the defensive formation. Once he entered the house, Zhuowen immediately realized that the Great Convergence formation had started to operate. Then the star god power in his body seemed to be boiling. The speed of the circulation in his body was several times faster than usual. This Great Convergence formation is indeed magical. It can actually increase the speed of the circulation of star god power. Zhuowen thought in his heart. He knew that if he were to sit cross-legged and cultivate, the circulation speed of his star divine power would be even faster. If he had the assistance of divine stones in his cultivation, the growth speed of his star divine power would most likely be 10 times faster than usual. Tang Ji found a good room in the house. At the same time, he imprinted the map of the main city on a jade slip and gave the key to the house to Zhuowen. Then, he brought Tan Haiba into the master bedroom of the house in a hurry. Tan Haiba also knew what was going to happen. The charm in her eyes became even stronger. After Tang Ji and Tan Haiba entered the master bedroom, they activated the Divine Sense Concealment formation. Zhuowen didn't need to guess to know what the two were going to do. Even if the Divine Sense Concealment formation was nothing to Zhuowen's powerful Divine Sense, Zhuowen was too lazy to peek at the two of them. Sitting in the room, Zhuowen looked at the map in the jade slip and had a general understanding of the main city. Let's go to the Grace Room first. Wuxiang has only been in the main city for 2 days. I wonder how she is doing there? Zhuowen put away the jade slip and left Tang Ji's house. However, not long after Zhuowen left, the door of the master bedroom of the house slowly opened. Tang Ji slowly walked out. At this moment, Tang Ji's clothes were still intact. His eyes were calm, and he didn't have the slightest bit of urgency like before. Brother Tang, When this guy took the badge, his expression changed. Did he discover the divine sense imprint in the badge? Tan Haiba followed behind Tangji. The charm on her face had long disappeared. Tangji shook his head and said, "A mere demigod wouldn't be able to discover the divine sense imprint in the badge. Moreover, I found that this person shouldn't be an ordinary demigod. I'm afraid that the upper house will be quite satisfied with this person. I don't know why the upper house wants to buy a demigod cultivator. We can only look for this kind of demigod cultivator with no background. We've been exhausted during this period of time, but we finally found this one." Tan Haiba frowned. Tangji smiled and said, "We don't need to guess the upper house's intentions. As long as we can earn divine stones, it's fine. Why bother with the upper house?" Tan Haiba nodded and said, "Brother Tang, should we contact the upper house now? It's better to get rid of this guy as soon as possible. Let's contact them immediately. When this kid comes back today, we'll prepare to trap him in the house. When the time comes, we'll let the upper house take this kid away. We'll also be able to get satisfactory divine stones." As Tangji spoke, he took out a yellow talisman from his spirit ring. He burned the yellow talisman, and a wisp of black smoke quietly left the place. Even the formation of the house couldn't stop the black smoke from leaving. Zhuowen strolled through the streets and soon arrived at the Hall of Sovereigns. Zhuowen was no stranger to the Hall of Sovereigns. It was Qi-Qi's residence. Taiqing and Yuqing used to live in the Hall of Sovereigns. Looking at the heavily guarded Hall of Sovereigns, Zhuowen shook his head. He didn't plan to go in. Although Qi-Qi knew him, he knew that Qi-Qi should know about him in the Taiqing immortal realm. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to meet Qi-Qi. Chapter 1922. See-through Duya Pavilion was not small, and the entertainment facilities inside were very comprehensive. It could be said that there was everything inside, and it was an extremely famous building in the main city. Seeing the environment of Duya Pavilion, Zhuowen frowned slightly. Although the name of Duya Pavilion sounded good, there were people coming and going inside, like a market to buy vegetables. This made Zhuowen very unhappy. This time, after finding Wuxiang, Zhuowen was ready to take her away from here. After entering Duya Pavilion, a woman in a green dress immediately came to greet them. She looked at Zhuowen and found that he was only a demigod. The enthusiasm in her beautiful eyes faded a lot, but she was still very polite. "What do you want to play in Duya Pavilion this time?" The woman in green dress asked with a smile. Zhuowen did not know much about the entertainment facilities in Duya Pavilion, but he was not interested. "I came here because of your reputation. I want to hear Miss Moyan Wuxiang play a song," Zhuowen said. The woman in green dress nodded slightly and said, "Miss Wuxiang's performance time is at night. It's not time for the performance yet. You can play with other facilities inside until night time." Zhuowen was startled, then waved his hand and said, "Then forget it. I'll come again at night." After saying that, Zhuowen left Duya Pavilion. Besides looking for Moyan Wuxiang, Zhuowen also wanted to buy black and yellow qi in Long River Star. He planned to cultivate black and yellow immortal to the second level of the Xiantian realm as soon as possible. Then he would fulfill his promise to Yin Tianwei. Moreover, Zhuowen was now occupying the body of the infant devourer. If he cultivated black and yellow immortal, his body's strength would probably rise to another level. The map in the jade slip given by Tangji was very detailed. He quickly followed the map and came to the biggest shop in the main city. This shop was called Long River Shop. It was said that the Hall of Gods opened in the main city. Zhuowen knew that there must be something like black and yellow qi inside. What made Zhuowen speechless was that he had to pay a godstone to enter the shop. This shop had 2 floors, and each floor was extremely large. Furthermore, there was a dazzling array of goods displayed inside. There were godly medicines, godly pills, godly weapons, and all kinds of refining materials. Zhuowen even saw a grade 1 divine herb, purple lucky grass. Moreover, this purple lucky grass was not cheap, as one stalk would cost 200 divine stones. Not long after, Zhuowen saw the heaven and earth qi that he needed. This was a rather large cabinet. The cabinet was surrounded by a powerful array formation. The cabinet was transparent, and one could see that there were bottles of different sizes inside. Among them, The larger bottles were dozens of feet in size, while the smaller ones were only the size of a palm. The black and yellow qi that Zhuan had obtained from Sun Yan's spirit ring was only the size of a palm. For this reason, Zhuan had specially checked the price of this palm-sized black and yellow qi. When he saw that this small bottle of black and yellow qi actually cost 1,000 divine stones, Zhuan's face immediately turned ugly. Then, he looked at the largest bottle and discovered that the price had actually increased by 20 times. It actually cost 200,000 divine stones. Zhuan was very clear that if he wanted to cultivate the black and yellow immortal to the Xiantian realm, he would at least need the largest bottle of black and yellow qi. However, 200,000 divine stones was simply a sky-high price for Zhuan. He had only obtained 5,000 divine stones from Sun Yan, and the other 9 demigod spirit rings, of which he had given 1,000 divine stones to Long Xiaotian. Now he only had a pitiful 4,000 divine stones on him. Shaking his head, Zhuan could only give up on buying the black and yellow qi. The price was simply too expensive. Moreover, he was embarrassingly short of money. He simply couldn't afford it. After strolling around the Long River shop, Zhuan discovered that most of the items here were extremely expensive. With only 4,000 divine stones on him, there were only a few items that he could afford. Zhuan was somewhat dispirited and left the shop. At the same time, he looked at the sky and discovered that there was still a long time before the Xiantian hour. Therefore, he decided to return to Tang Ji's house first. When Zhuan returned to Tang Ji's house, he immediately felt that something was wrong. At this moment, there was no one in the house. It was eerily quiet. Zhuan released his divine sense and discovered that Tang Ji and Tan Haiba were not in the master bedroom. Frowning slightly, Zhuan didn't take it to heart. Instead, he returned to his room and sat cross-legged. After about half an hour, Zhuan suddenly opened his eyes. He discovered that the great concentration array in the house had stopped operating. Walking out of the room, Zhuan came to the door. He took out the key that Tang Ji had given him, and was about to open the door. However, the moment he placed the key on the door, an ominous feeling arose in his heart. Then a white light suddenly swept out from the door, and turned into a net to bind Zhuan. Zhuan was caught off guard, and was immediately trapped by the net of white light. Creak. At the same time, the door in front of him slowly opened and a man and a woman walked out. The man and the woman were Tang Ji and Tan Haiba, who were not in the house. Brother Tang, what is the meaning of this? Zhuan frowned slightly and asked in confusion. At this moment, Tang Ji was no longer as polite as before. Instead, his eyes were filled with condescension. Tan Haiba revealed a sarcastic smile and said, "What a stupid guy. He doesn't even know that he has been betrayed. However, it's good that he is stupid. We don't have to go through so much trouble." Zhuan's consciousness quietly observed the net of white light around him. He realized that the white light was not weak. It was impossible for an ordinary demigod to escape from the net of white light. However, to Zhuan, it was not difficult to escape from the net of white light. However, he was not in a hurry. He wanted to ask the two of them what their intentions were. "What do you mean?" Zhuan's voice was trembling. At the same time, his eyes revealed a hint of fear. Looking at Zhuan's appearance, Tan Haiba's beautiful eyes were filled with pride. She sneered and said, "Didn't I say just now? Of course we are going to betray you." Boom. However, before Tan Haiba could finish speaking, the net of white light in front of them suddenly broke. Zhuan swept toward Tan Haiba like a hot knife through butter. Tan Haiba obviously did not expect Zhuan to break out of the net. She screamed and was stunned on the spot. "How dare you?" Tang Ji's pupils shrank. However, he reacted quickly. He grabbed with his right hand. Star God energy spread out, and turned into a giant hand that grabbed at Zhuan. Tan Haiba took a few steps back. Seeing Tang Ji make a move, her heart relaxed. Tang Ji was in the early heavenly god realm. Long One was just a demigod. Tang Ji would definitely be helpless against him. Tang Ji had just made a move when he realized that something was wrong. Zhuan's attack suddenly changed. He was actually rushing toward him. "You want to fight me head-on? You are simply courting death." Tang Ji quickly guessed Zhuan's intention. The corner of his mouth revealed a mocking smile. His right hand gathered even more terrifying star god energy, hoping to injure Zhuan severely. Bang! The two of them collided in an instant. Then, a crackling sound rang out. Tangji vomited blood and flew backward, smashing heavily on the ground. At the same time, Zhuowen was like a ghost. He appeared in front of Tangji in an instant. His right hand formed a sword finger, and shot out a milky white sword light. It pierced into Tangji's dantian and crushed it. Tangji's eyes widened. With his dantian broken, he immediately felt a sense of weakness fill his body. In the end he fell to the ground. Tan Haiba's beautiful eyes were lifeless. She pointed at Zhuowen and screamed. She really could not understand. This Long One was clearly a demigod. How could he subdue Tangji so easily? Scream again and I will kill you. Zhuowen coldly stared at Tan Haiba. The latter immediately shut her mouth and did not dare to scream again. However, from her trembling body, it was obvious that she was very afraid. Zhuowen pointed at the sword chi in his right hand. The sword shadow turned into thorns and tied Tan Haiba up. He threw her to Tangji's side. Then he looked down at the two of them and said, I have no enmity with you. We have never met before. Why did you two have such bad intentions? Tangji secretly complained in his heart. The strength that Zhuowen displayed was too strong. He defeated him in an instant and shattered his dantian. He knew that he had kicked an iron plate. Tangji was also a smart person. He knew that Zhuowen did not destroy his divine soul. He only destroyed his dantian. He probably did not intend to kill him. Instead, he wanted to find out the purpose of their actions. Therefore, without waiting for Zhuowen to continue, Tangji immediately said, Senior, please spare my life. We were forced to do all of this. The ones who really wanted to capture you are not us. We have never wanted to harm you. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. Naturally, he would not listen to Tangji's words. He just stared at the latter coldly. Tangji felt goosebumps from the stare. He braced himself and explained everything clearly. Zhuowen listened in silence. Only then did he know that Tangji was a human trafficker. Tangji would often wander around the Long River planet. As long as he met a cultivator who was only a demigod and had just entered the Long River planet for the first time, he would be invited to the Long River planet. As long as the cultivators were deceived, Tangji would invite them into his house. Then, Tangji would contact his family and let them take away the trapped cultivators and profit from it. No wonder Tangji could buy such a good house in the main city when he was only in the early heavenly god stage. His main source of income was probably from selling demigod cultivators. However, what made Zhuowen curious was, who was the family and why did they want to buy demigod cultivators? Moreover, he heard from Tangji that the same family had been buying demigod cultivators for many years. He had already worked with them many times. Who is the family? Do you know? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Tangji's expression was a little unnatural. He hurriedly said, Senior, I don't know the family's background. After all, how could I let you know the details of this kind of business? Seeing Tangji's unnatural expression, Zhuowen knew that this guy was lying. After working with them so many times, Zhuowen did not believe that Tangji would not know the family's background at all. Zhuowen put his sword finger between Tangji's brows and said, You're a smart person. You know what to do. Tangji's pupils shrank. In the end he sighed and said, I'll say it. I only hope that Senior can let me live. Sure, Zhuowen nodded. He did not plan to kill Tangji. Chapter 1923. Tan Yuzhuowen's eyes narrowed. He had never thought that Tangji's so-called upper family would be from the Dark Star. Zhuowen had heard of the 4 secondary stars around the Long River Star. These 4 secondary stars were the King Star, the Dark Star, the Fire Star, and the Extreme Star. These 4 secondary planets were the 4 most powerful life planets in the Long River Galaxy apart from the main planet, the Long River Star. As for the 4 secondary planets, their star lords were far stronger than peak heavenly god. It was said that they had reached the level of false true god. It could be said that it was difficult for anyone below true god to fight them. After seizing the body of the infant devourer, although Zhuowen's strength had increased tremendously, facing these false true gods, Zhuowen was still not their opponent. However, Zhuowen believed that if he advanced to the heavenly god realm, he would be invincible under the true god realm. At that time, he would be able to absorb the adult devourer's energy without restraint. Since he had yet to advance to the heavenly god realm, absorbing the adult devourer's energy would be a waste. After all, he couldn't increase his cultivation realm. Absorbing the energy would only increase his strength temporarily. Dark Star? According to you, your upper family's people will be here soon? Zhuowen said indifferently. Tang Ji's face froze, then he said, yes. Once the upper family's people know that I failed, I'm afraid my life will be in danger. Senior, for the sake of this junior's honesty, let this junior go this time. Otherwise, when the upper family's people come, we will all die. Die? Not necessarily. After I deal with the upper family's people, I'll think about how to deal with the two of you. Zhuowen's eyes were calm as he swept the two of them into his spirit ring. After that, Zhuowen used the shapeless all beings and the aura on his body began to change. His face even squirmed and turned into Tang Ji's appearance. As Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the demigod realm, Zhuowen released his divine sense, controlling it to the strength of an early heavenly god realm expert. Then, he leisurely sat on a stone table under the shade of a tree in the courtyard. After waiting for about 2 hours, Zhuowen discovered that the door of the house had been quietly opened and 5 people walked in. The 5 of them were all men. The leader was a middle-aged man with a sinister expression. His cultivation was the highest out of the 5 of them, at mid-god. The other 4 were all early gods. As soon as he came in, the middle-aged man noticed Zhuowen. He led the 4 people in front of Zhuowen and said coldly, Tang Ji, where is he? Zhuowen pointed at the seat opposite him with his right hand and said, take a seat first. Longwen still hasn't returned until now. We'll capture him together once he returns. The middle-aged man stared coldly at Zhuowen, but he did not sit down. Instead, he slapped the stone table with his right hand, smashing it into pieces. Tang Ji, didn't you say that you could capture that person? Why are you saying that he hasn't returned yet? You're contradicting yourself. Are you messing with us? The middle-aged man was not polite at all. However, as soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, his gaze suddenly met Zhuowen's eyes. He discovered that strange, ring-shaped rainbow-colored light had appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. He saw his childhood, his family and his friends in the rainbow-colored light. When he extended his right hand to touch the family he saw, he only felt pain in his dantian. Then his eyes cleared up and he stared fixedly at Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen's right hand had already pointed at the middle-aged man's dantian. Following that, the middle-aged man's face filled with pain. He could clearly feel that his dantian had shattered. My lord. When the middle-aged man's dantian was shattered, the 4 early heavenly god cultivators reacted and attacked immediately. Unfortunately, Zhuowen pointed with his right hand and countless sword shadows transformed into terrifying thistles and thorns, instantly trapping the 4 of them and killing them. You're not Tang Ji. Who are you? The middle-aged man clutched his stomach and stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. He knew Tang Ji's strength very well. It was impossible for Tang Ji to ambush him, let alone kill the 4 early gods. Zhuowen looked at the middle-aged man indifferently and released Tang Ji and Tan Haiba from the spirit ring. Tang Ji and Tan Haiba were still in a daze. However, when they saw the 4 early celestial gods on the ground, they were shocked. Then they turned around and saw the middle-aged man. Lord Tanyu, the upper house actually sent you to help us this time? Tang Ji looked at the middle-aged man in surprise. He had interacted with Tanyu a few times and knew how powerful the latter was. However, in such a short period of time, 4 early gods were killed and Tanyu's dantian was shattered. How could he not know who the culprit was? Looking at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze, Tang Ji was secretly regretting. He did not expect that not only did he kick an iron board, but he also got himself into big trouble. The young man in front of him was only a demigod. However, from the strength he displayed, Tang Ji already thought that Zhuowen was an expert above the late gods. Who are you? Did the other vice star send you? Tanyu quickly calmed down and said coldly. Zhuowen looked at Tanyu and said, I heard that you're from the Dark Star. Was it your master's idea to buy a demigod rogue cultivator from a human trafficker? However, Tanyu's face was filled with a cold smile. He glanced at Zhuowen mockingly and did not say anything else. In his heart, he had already determined that Zhuowen should be the spy of another vice star. Seeing Tanyu's expression, Zhuowen did not want to waste his breath on him. He pressed his right hand on Tanyu's head, intending to forcefully search his soul. Your divine soul. Tanyu looked at Zhuowen in fear. The moment Zhuowen searched his soul, he saw the boundless starry sky in Zhuowen's divine soul. Under this starry sky, his divine soul was as weak as an ant. Zhuowen's divine soul was much stronger than Tanyu's. Tanyu did not even have the right to resist. The memories in his divine soul were completely checked by Zhuowen. From Tanyu's memories, Zhuowen found that Tanyu was really one of the Dark Star Lord's men. Moreover, it was the Dark Star Lord's order to buy a demigod rogue cultivator. As for why the Dark Star Lord did this, Tanyu did not have the right to know. Originally, Zhuowen was still casually checking Tanyu's memories. However, when he reached the end of the memories, his body trembled. In Tanyu's memories, a strange scabbard suddenly flew over from the starry sky 60 years ago. The speed of this scabbard was extremely fast. Although many gods in the Dark Star Lord noticed it, they did not catch where the scabbard landed on the Dark Star Lord. Coincidentally, the Dark Star Lord was in seclusion at that time. After a period of time, there was a craze to search for the scabbard in the Dark Star Lord. However, no one found any traces of the scabbard. Instead, many gods died in the process of searching for the scabbard. As more and more gods died, many gods gave up on searching for the scabbard. Although the Dark Star Lord was extremely concerned about this matter after coming out of seclusion, after sending out many gods, they still could not find any traces of the scabbard. Later, the matter was left unsettled. This memory was not particularly deep in Tanyu's divine soul. Clearly, Tanyu did not care too much about this memory. However, Zhuowen knew that the scabbard that suddenly flew over from the starry sky was very likely the blood-splashing 5 steps that he was looking for. However, what made Zhuowen strange was that the blood-splashing 5 steps was only a substandard god tool. Even if it had Xiaohe as its artifact spirit, it should not have the ability to travel through the starry sky. Zhuowen then thought about how many gods died in the Dark Star Lord's search for the scabbard. This made Zhuowen somewhat uncertain. The blood-splashing 5 steps was only a substandard god tool. How could it have the ability to kill gods? This made Zhuowen suspect that the scabbard was the blood-splashing 5 steps. Looks like I have to take a look at the Dark Star Lord's divine soul. Zhuowen rubbed his forehead. Although the scabbard in the Dark Star Lord's divine soul might not be the blood-splashing 5 steps, Zhuowen still had to make a trip. After all, everything was too coincidental. Zhuowen glanced at Tanyu, who had fainted because of the soul search. However, he did not kill Tanyu. After the soul search, Zhuowen completely erased the memories of him from Tanyu's divine soul. Whether he killed Tanyu or not, it did not affect him much. After collecting the spirit rings of Tanyu and the other 4 early heavenly god stage cultivators, Zhuowen burned the corpses of the 4 early heavenly god stage cultivators to ashes. Then he said to the silent Tang Ji and Tan Haiba, "I'll leave Tanyu to the 2 of you." Tang Ji was a smart person. He knew that Zhuowen was planning to spare their lives. He quickly nodded. At the same time, he took off the spirit rings on his body and handed them to Zhuowen. He said, "Senior, this is Junior's collection of many years. Take it as Junior's filial piety to you." After speaking, Tangji took out a piece of golden paper from his bosom. There was a seal at the end of the golden paper. "Senior, this is Junior's house deed. Junior has no use for it, so I'll give it to Senior," Tangji said with a flattering smile. Since Tangji took the initiative, Zhuowen naturally did not refuse. It just so happened that he was lacking divine stones right now. After doing all this, Tangji put Tanyu into the spirit ring. After bowing respectfully to Zhuowen, he left the house with Tan Haiba. Tangji's dantian was broken. Now he urgently needed to recover his dantian. As for Zhuowen, he did not dare to stay a moment longer. He was afraid that Zhuowen would go back on his words and kill him. After Tangji left, Zhuowen entered the master bedroom and began to check the 6 spirit rings he had just obtained. Among them, the spirit rings of Tanyu's 4 subordinates had the least amount of wealth. Other than some divine stones, there were some miscellaneous items and materials. Although these 4 people's spirit rings had the least amount of wealth, there were more than 10,000 divine stones in total. It was more than Zhuowen's current wealth. After Zhuowen opened Tanyu's spirit ring, his eyes immediately lit up. There were many things in Tanyu's spirit ring. Just the divine stones alone were more than 100,000. There were even many level 1 divine medicines inside. Other than that, Zhuowen also found a heavenly divine artifact. Previously, Zhuowen's attack was too fast. Tanyu did not even have time to take out his heavenly divine artifact before his dantian was broken by Zhuowen. This heavenly divine artifact was a long spear. This spear was completely black. Its appearance was like a carbon rod. There was nothing special about it. Zhuowen had also used spear-type weapons before. He held this long spear and casually waved it. He felt a surge of law energy from the spear light. Although this long spear is relatively ordinary among heavenly divine artifacts, it's still passable for temporary use. Zhuowen did not have any heavenly divine artifacts now. If he equipped this long spear, it would more or less increase Zhuowen's strength. Chapter 1924. Soul-absorbing divine needle. Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful. When Zhuowen's divine sense scanned the spear, he discovered something unusual about the tip of the spear. When Zhuowen's right hand landed on the tip of the spear, he actually felt a sense of trepidation. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with light. Then his right hand kept rubbing the tip of the spear. At the same time, his divine sense turned into a spiral and kept spinning around the tip of the spear. It was as if he wanted to polish the tip of the spear. Time passed slowly. Zhuowen's eyes became brighter and brighter. He discovered that as his divine sense polished the tip of the spear, it was as if a hidden sharpness was awakening. Bang! Suddenly, the tip of the spear broke off from the body of the spear and floated in the air. At this moment, the tip of the spear was no longer pitch black. Instead, it emitted a sword light. Moreover, due to the polishing of the divine sense, the tip of the spear had become a finger-sized needle. Whoosh! Zhuowen's divine sense moved. The long needle suddenly flew up into the sky and pierced through the roof. It broke through the defensive formation of the house and flew up into the sky. However, the long needle quickly returned to the house under Zhuowen's control. Zhuowen did not care about the broken defensive formation and roof. Instead, he stared at the long needle in front of him with bright eyes. Such an extraordinary long needle is actually hidden within an ordinary heavenly divine artifact. If my guess is correct, this long needle needs to be activated with one's divine sense in order to unleash a powerful attack. Furthermore, the stronger one's divine sense is, the more powerful the needle will be. Zhuowen kept the long needle. This thing was hidden in the tip of the spear. Moreover, it was in a dusty state. Tanyu did not know where he got this spear from. Tanyu thought that this was just an ordinary spear. He did not expect that such a powerful divine object was actually hidden in it. The power of this long needle was much stronger than an ordinary heavenly divine artifact. Moreover, it was as hard as iron. If Zhuowen used his divine sense to launch a surprise attack with the long needle, a peak heavenly god would most likely die under this long needle, if he was not paying attention. From now on, this will be called the soul-absorbing divine needle. Putting away the soul-absorbing god needle, Zhuowen was in a good mood. After throwing the broken spear to the side, he continued to look through Tanyu's spirit ring. However, he did not find anything that made Zhuowen's eyes light up. Zhuowen was the last to open Tangji's spirit ring. When he opened it, he was shocked by the large number of divine stones inside. Tangji's spirit ring was filled with divine stones. Other than that, there was nothing else. Zhuowen did a quick count and found that the number of divine stones in Tangji's ring had reached a terrifying 500,000. Looks like Tangji has done quite a bit of human trafficking. Zhuowen muttered as he put away the spirit ring. He regretted letting Tangji go just like that. After all, with Tangji's personality, he would definitely return to his old profession after recovering his dantian. However, Zhuowen only had a fleeting thought. It would probably take a long time for Tangji to recover. Moreover, he did not care so much. The harvest this time could be said to be extremely rich. Now, Zhuowen had at least 610,000 divine stones on him. To the current him, this was definitely a huge sum of money. After counting the spoils of war, Zhuowen left the house. He was very clear that the failure of Tanyu and the others would soon attract the attention of the people from Dark Star. Therefore, it was not good to stay here for too long. After leaving the house, Zhuowen casually found a pawnshop and pawned the land deed given by Tangji. However, What made Zhuowen speechless was that the land deed was only pawned for 50,000 divine stones. Back then, Tangji had said that his house was worth 100,000 divine stones. Now that it was in the pawn shop, the value had shrunk by so much. However, this land deed was also a hot potato for Zhuowen. Even though he knew that he had been cheated, Zhuowen still sold it without hesitation. At this moment, there were still 2 hours until the evening. After leaving the pawn shop, Zhuowen first went to the Long River shop. He planned to buy the Heaven and Earth aura. The Long River shop was bustling with people coming and going. It was bustling with activity. Zhuowen was familiar with the process. He arrived at the counter where the Heaven and Earth aura was sold. However, what made Zhuowen surprised was that there were only 3 bottles of Heaven and Earth aura left on the counter. They were of the large, medium, and small sizes. He did not expect that the Heaven and Earth aura would be so expensive. It was actually so popular. In less than half a day, there was only so much Heaven and Earth aura left on the counter. Zhuowen pressed the bell on the counter. Previously, when he entered the shop, he had learned that customers who wanted to buy goods would have to press the corresponding bell on the counter. Only then would the shop assistant come out to greet them. After a while, a rather tall woman came over. The woman sized up Zhuowen and said calmly, "Are you looking for the smallest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura?" Zhuowen was stunned. He had not even opened his mouth and the woman was already certain that he wanted to buy the smallest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura. She was too full of herself. However, Zhuowen also knew that his aura was only that of a demigod. Subconsciously, the woman thought that he could not afford the largest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura. "Miss, I need the largest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura. Can you give it to me?" Zhuowen was about to speak when a rather elegant voice came from behind. Then a handsome man walked over slowly with a middle-aged man and an old man. The man did not look sideways at all. He did not even look at Zhuowen. He came in front of the counter and stared at the woman in front of the counter with a smile on his face. "So it's young Master Pan." Looking at the handsome man, the originally expressionless tall woman suddenly had an extremely bright smile on her face. Then, she quickly took out the largest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura from the counter. Although the largest bottle of mysterious yellow qi was dozens of feet in size, the tall woman was able to shrink the bottle to any size she wanted while taking it out. After taking out the largest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura, the tall woman took out the smallest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura and casually threw it in front of Zhuowen. She said, 10,000 god stones. After paying the god stones, you can leave." Zhuowen did not take the smallest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura. Instead, he looked at the tall woman indifferently and said, "Everything has a first come, first served rule. When did I say that I wanted the smallest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura?" The tall woman slightly frowned, turned her head and coldly stared at Zhuowen, then sneered and said, "The largest bottle of black and yellow gas costs 200,000 god stones. How can a person like you have so many god stones?" At this moment, the handsome man who had originally ignored Zhuowen also turned his head to look at Zhuowen and frowned slightly. He did not expect that a mere demigod in front of him would want to buy the largest bottle of Heaven and Earth aura. A cultivator with such a cultivation level would not even be able to take out 10,000 god stones, let alone 200,000 god stones. Therefore, he thought that this guy was causing trouble. Although he did not like Zhuowen to steal the show, the handsome man still said in a gentlemanly manner, "Brother, I urgently need this Heaven and Earth aura. Please do not fight with me for it." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. The handsome man's words were polite, but his tone was unquestionable, as if his words could not be disobeyed. Moreover, after the handsome man finished speaking, the 2 people standing behind him coldly stared at him, their eyes filled with warning. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. The handsome man in front of him said it nicely, but his actions were a blatant threat. "My young master is a member of the Pan family in the Golden Sun Galaxy. I think you should know what I mean. Whether or not you have 200,000 god stones, you'd better know your place and get lost." At the same time, a cold voice echoed in Zhuowen's mind. He knew that it was the old man who had sent the voice transmission. This was no longer gentlemanly, it was an unceremonious threat. The tall woman at the counter also realized that the situation was not right. She immediately smiled and said, "Young Master Pan, don't bother with a nobody like him. I'll sell you the heaven and earth aura. The handsome man said politely, that won't do. After all, this brother proposed to buy it first. I have to wait for this brother to part with his treasures before I plan to buy it. Otherwise, others will think that I'm taking advantage of my position to bully others. The tall woman giggled and said, young Master Pan is too polite. This guest must have been joking just now. Zhuowen looked at the elegant and handsome man, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. This man with the surname Pan was really a whore, and he still wanted to set up a monument to his chastity. Zhuowen almost couldn't stand it anymore. The handsome man looked at Zhuowen with a smile. Just now, the old man had already sent a voice transmission to this demigod guy. He knew that anyone who had heard of the Golden Sun Galaxy would make concessions. Unfortunately, Zhuowen turned his head around and didn't pay any attention to the handsome man. Instead, he looked at the tall woman and said, since young Master Pan is so modest, then I'll accept your offer. I'll take the largest bottle of Skyearth energy. As soon as Zhuowen said this, the handsome man's face froze and an unnatural expression appeared on his face. He wanted to say something, but he found that he had nothing to say. The modest words from before were indeed from his mouth. If he wanted to fight for the heaven and earth aura from Zhuowen now, it would be no different from slapping himself in the face. The middle-aged man and the old man standing behind the handsome man had cold looks in their eyes, but Zhuowen turned a blind eye to them. The tall woman looked at Zhuowen strangely. She didn't expect that this guy would dare to fight for something in Panda's hands. Wasn't he tired of living? However, seeing that Panda didn't say anything, she also knew that if she pushed the heaven and earth aura to Panda now, it would be self-defeating. Young Master Pan is magnanimous. Since you want it, take out 200,000 divine stones. The tall woman said coldly. Zhuowen handed the storage bag that he had prepared earlier to the tall woman and said, there are 200,000 divine stones inside. You can count them yourself. The tall woman took the storage pouch and counted it carefully. When she found that there were indeed 200,000 godstones inside, her eyes immediately revealed a look of surprise. This mere demigod fellow actually had so many godstones. After taking the heaven and earth aura, Zhuowen left the Long River shop. However, as soon as Zhuowen left the shop, Panda, the middle-aged man, and the old man followed behind him. Chapter 1925. Presumptuous request. Panda aggressively led the middle-aged man, an old man, out of the Long River store. However, he was dumbfounded because he actually couldn't find any trace of that despicable demigod ant. Yurong, where did that kid hide? Panda looked at the old man beside him. The old man's divine sense was the strongest amongst the three of them. Although his cultivation was only at the mid-stage of the heavenly god realm, his divine sense was close to the late stage of the heavenly god realm. The old man's expression was slightly awkward as he said, young master, my divine sense couldn't find that fellow either. Panda was shocked, and his gaze was gloomy as he said, looks like we underestimated that fellow. He's a mere demigod. Yet he was able to take out 200,000 divine stones. He's not simple. He probably possesses some sort of concealment technique that allowed him to escape from your divine sense. The old man and the middle-aged man nodded in deep agreement. The middle-aged man said, young master, what should we do? There's no need to care about him. It's merely heaven and earth energy. However, if we're lucky enough to encounter that little bastard next time, we'll kill him on the spot. As he spoke, a trace of killing intent flashed through Panda's eyes. It's almost time. Let's enter the Imperial Pavilion. Panda led the old man and the middle-aged man into the Imperial Pavilion. Not far away from the Imperial Pavilion, Zhuowen silently watched Panda's group of three enter the pavilion under the warm reception of a maid at the entrance. At this moment, Zhuowen's appearance had completely changed. At this moment he was a young man with a sickly pale complexion. His expression was gloomy, and it was obvious that he wasn't someone to be trifled with. When Zhuowen arrived at the entrance of the Imperial Pavilion, the green-clothed woman he'd met the first time was standing not far away from the entrance. Where's Miss Wuxiang's performance? Zhuowen asked ambiguously. The green-clothed woman frowned slightly as she glanced at Zhuowen. Then she pointed behind her and said, go straight ahead, then turn right. Walk all the way to the end, And that's where Miss Wuxiang's performance is. However, you'll have to pay 5 divine stones first. Now that Zhuowen had a sufficient amount of divine stones, he naturally didn't care about the 5 divine stones. After paying, Zhuowen entered the imperial pavilion. Zhuowen followed the green-robed woman's instructions and arrived at the end of the left turn. This was an open-air arena. The area was quite large, and a white jade platform was built in the center of the arena. At this moment, a veiled woman was sitting cross-legged on the high platform. There was a guqin placed in front of her, and there were 2 maidservants standing on either side of her. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the veiled woman. He could tell at a glance that this woman was Moyan Wuxiang. Below the white jade platform, there were many seats. At this moment, most of the seats were occupied. However, there were many people here. Although there were some empty seats, most of the cultivators actually stood below the platform and did not occupy those seats. As for Panda's group of 3 that entered first, Zhuowen noticed that they were seated at the most conspicuous seats below. There were many young geniuses seated near Panda as well. The group of people were chatting and laughing, and it was rather lively. Zhuowen stopped a cultivator who was passing by and asked, "Brother, there are many seats here. Why do so many people prefer to stand?" This cultivator was also a demigod. He looked up and down at Zhuowen and said strangely, "I say, brother, don't you know the rules here? The seats here all need to be paid with godstones. The worst of these seats cost 500 godstones, and the better ones cost thousands. Most people are not willing to spend this kind of money." Hearing this, Zhuowen was relieved. He immediately smiled and said, "Brother, I feel like an old friend at first sight. I plan to buy a seat. Do you want to come with me?" When the cultivator heard this, he knew that Zhuowen was going to treat him. He patted his chest and showed an excited expression. He gave a thumbs up and said, "Brother, you are so generous." The 2 of them chose a slightly worse seat. After Zhuowen paid 500 godstones, the 2 of them sat on the ground. "May I ask your name, brother?" With a sucker like Zhuowen treating him to a meal, the cultivator appeared to be rather happy and his words were filled with enthusiasm. "Long One." Zhuowen answered casually, but his eyes were looking at Panda, who was sitting in a conspicuous position. The moment he entered this place, Zhuowen felt that Panda's gaze towards Mo Yin was very different. In particular, there was a burning desire and deep possessiveness in his eyes, which made Zhuowen feel a chill in his heart. "So it is Brother Long. I am Himu. There are not many people as hospitable as Brother Long. It is my fortune to be able to meet Brother Long," Himu said enthusiastically. Zhuowen waved his hand, but pointed at the conspicuous seats of Panda and the others and said, "Brother He, that should be the best seat, right? What kind of people can sit in those seats?" Himu smiled and said, "Brother Long, you asked the right person. I know all of them." Then Himu pointed at Panda and said, "This person is called Panda. He is a member of the Pan family in the Gold Sun Galaxy, near the Long River Galaxy. This Pan family is not simple. The ruler of the Gold Sun Galaxy, Pan Tian, is a member of the Pan family. In the Gold Sun Galaxy, the Pan family is very powerful. No one dares to provoke them." "Oh, this person's background is so big? Is this Pandu a descendant of Pan Tian?" Zhuowen asked in surprise. "No, but Panda's background in the Pan family is not low. His status is quite high. Even if he is an insignificant member of the Pan family, he is much more honorable than us rogue cultivators." At this point, Himu's eyes dimmed. He was a loose cultivator, and he had to rely on himself to cultivate. He even had to save as many godstones as he could. Compared to Panda, a rich kid who could enjoy countless resources, the gap was too big. Zhuowen nodded. Then, under Zhuowen's indirect questioning, Zhuowen learned the identities of the people sitting next to Panda from Himu. However, it was worth mentioning that there was a young man in brocade clothes sitting closest to Panda. This young man was called Qi Wei. He was a descendant of Qi Qi. In the ruler's hall of the Long River Galaxy, he was a famous genius. He had cultivated for less than 100 years, and was already a middle-stage heavenly god. "Brother Long, Miss Wuxiang is about to perform. This should be your first time listening to Miss Wuxiang's song, right? Let me tell you, Miss Wuxiang's song is indeed worth listening to. Any cultivator who listens to Miss Wuxiang's song will have all the distracting thoughts in their hearts vanish. You can even feel a little from the rhythm of the song. It can be said that Miss Wuxiang's song is very magical. Speaking of Mo Yin Wuxiang's song, Hemu's face turned red. He seemed very excited. Hearing Hemu's endless praise, Zhuowen was surprised. He had heard Wuxiang's music before, but it didn't seem to be as magical as Hemu said. Miss Wuxiang is about to start playing, Hemu suddenly said. Zhuowen's attention was also on the high platform. Not only him, but all the cultivators around the high platform were staring at Mo Yin Wuxiang. Dong. Mo Yin Wuxiang's slender fingers were slowly strumming the surface of the guqin. The strings of the guqin were whispering softly, like the water in a ditch murmuring to the crops on the shore. It was also like a trickle of water that slowly flowed in the hearts of the cultivators. The moment the sound of the guqin rang out, the noisy surroundings of the high platform quieted down. Most of the cultivators closed their eyes and quietly listened to the sound of the guqin. The moment the sound of the guqin rang out, Zhuowen was suddenly shocked. He could hear a trace of Taoist rhyme from the sound of the guqin. This trace of Taoist rhyme and Taoist rhyme were somewhat similar, but completely different. Zhuowen quietly listened to the Taoist rhyme in the sound of the guqin. He suddenly thought of the Taoist rhyme that he had comprehended in the past. He realized that under the effect of this music, his Taoist rhyme actually surged. At this moment, Zhuowen was quite shocked. He was sure that Wuxiang's guqin music did not have this trace of Taoist rhyme at all. He knew that this Taoist rhyme was probably comprehended by Wuxiang later on. Although he did not know what kind of power it was, he could guess that this Taoist rhyme was definitely an extremely mysterious power like Taoist rhyme. When did Wuxiang comprehend such a mysterious power? Zhuowen stared at the woman on the high platform. His eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. Almost everyone present closed their eyes in the sound of the guqin. They carefully listened to the artistic conception and comprehension brought by the music. Only Zhuowen and another person were not affected by the sound of the guqin at all. Zhuowen himself possessed the power of Taoist rhyme. The power of the guqin music and Zhuowen's Taoist rhyme should have come from the same source. Therefore, it was unable to affect Zhuowen. Not far from Zhuowen, in another remote corner, a black figure was wrapped in a thick black robe. It was difficult to see his face clearly. He was hidden in the darkness and silently observed Mo Yin Wuxiang. This child is actually not affected at all by the power of the music? The mysterious black-robed person also noticed that Zhuowen was not affected and muttered in a low voice. This mysterious black-robed person was like the darkness. Even Zhuowen was not aware of him at all. It was clear that this black-robed person was not simple. The sound of the guqin slowly faded away. It brought a sense of loss to everyone present. Obviously, no one wanted to wake up from the sound of the guqin so early. Miss Wuxiang's guqin music is still so enchanting. I really want to listen to it again, Hemu said with some melancholy. After Mo Yin Wuxiang finished the song, he slowly stood up. He picked up the guqin and planned to leave the high platform. Miss Wuxiang, please wait for a moment. Suddenly Panda, who was sitting on the main seat, suddenly shouted out. Panda's voice was quite loud and clear. It instantly broke the silence and caused many cultivators to frown. However, when they saw that the owner of the voice was Panda, although they were dissatisfied, they did not dare to show it. They knew that Panda's background was not small. Mo Yin Wuxiang stopped and looked at Panda indifferently. What is it? Panda cupped his hands and said with a smile. Miss Wuxiang, I promised you last time. Please fulfill it. Panda's words caused an uproar in the audience. The people present were not fools. How could they not know what it meant to play Phoenix seeks Phoenix for Phoenix? Mo Yin Wuxiang's beautiful face changed slightly. He said in a low voice, Young Master Pan, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. When did Wuxiang promise you that? Chapter 1926. Farce. It's actually a Douya token. Only the owner of the Douya pavilion has this. When Panda took out the token, there was an uproar. Everyone was shocked. Even Mo Yin Wuxiang, who was on the high platform, froze. Zhuowen frowned. He didn't know about the Douya token. He asked in a low voice, Brother He, what's the origin of this token? Hemu said, This is the token of the owner of the Doya Pavilion. In the Doya Pavilion, only the owner has it. Generally, the owner of this token is like the owner himself. As long as the request isn't too excessive, the employees of the Doya Pavilion must agree to the owner's request. Himu said helplessly, Miss Wuxiang is an employee of the Doya Pavilion. Since Panda has this token, Miss Wuxiang has to agree to Panda's request. Zhuo Wen's eyes slowly narrowed as he coldly looked at Panda. He naturally knew the meaning of this song. Speaking of which, when Moyan Wuxiang parted with him, he had played this song. He also understood Wuxiang's feelings, but he didn't think too much about it when he parted with him. Now that he thought about it, it took a lot of courage for a woman to put aside her reservations and play this song for him. He could imagine the disappointment in Moyan Wuxiang's heart. Now Panda was asking Moyan Wuxiang to play this song in front of everyone. Everyone could see his intentions. Miss Wuxiang, it's not too much to play this song for me, right? Panda held the token and said with a smile. Moyan Wuxiang's pretty face turned pale. She looked at Panda coldly. Just as she was about to refuse, a voice that was neither feminine nor masculine suddenly sounded. Moyan Wuxiang is an otherworldly fairy. How can an ordinary person be worthy of her? And how can an ordinary person be qualified to listen to this song? This young master is making things difficult for Miss Wuxiang. That's a loss of grace. When the words came out, everyone was shocked. They immediately looked at the source of the voice. They saw a man with a pale face slowly stand up. His eyes were full of passion. This passion was obviously directed at Moyan Wuxiang. Seeing the pale man's appearance, many cultivators secretly shook their heads. They knew that this guy was also an admirer of Moyan Wuxiang. However, did this person not know about Panda's background? He actually dared to speak sarcastically. His courage was not ordinary. Panda's eyes were cold. He stared indifferently at Zhuowen and said. Mockingly he said, Wuxiang, Lord, do you think you are worthy of Wuxiang? Zhuowen said, Wuxiang. Wuxiang. At least I won't be Lord Pan. Or at least I won't use force. Or force. Wuxiang. Zhuowen's words struck a chord in everyone's hearts. The others were also very displeased with Panda's actions. However, due to the power behind Panda, they didn't dare to speak up. Moyan Wuxiang is. Moyan Wuxiang is Wuxiang. Wuxiang studio is studio. Himu complained in his heart. He didn't expect Long One to be so daring. He actually dared to refute Panda. In order to not be implicated, Himu quietly left his seat and left this place. He didn't want to have anything to do with Zhuowen right now. Panda's eyes were cold. He stood on his seat and looked down at Zhuowen. He said, You are a little better than me. Today, I want to see how you will do it. You Rong, slap him 100 times. Don't kill him. The old man standing beside Panda grinned. His eyes were full of brutality. He slowly walked towards Zhuowen. Lord Pan, don't you know the rules of the Elegance Pavilion? Fighting is not allowed here. Moyan Wuxiang's beautiful eyes were cold. Panda didn't care. He said, Miss Wuxiang, don't you know that the holder of the Pavilion Master token can teach the offender a lesson? This person spoke frivolously. I should teach him a lesson on behalf of Miss Wuxiang. Seeing Panda's careless appearance, Moyan Wuxiang was angry. However, she didn't make a move. She knew very well that with her strength, it was difficult to stop Yurong. After all, Yurong was a middle-stage divine realm cultivator. He was extremely powerful. I don't need to know your name. I don't want to know your origin. Offending the young master today is the biggest mistake of your life. Yurong came in front of Zhuowen. He sneered and raised his right hand. He wanted to slap Zhuowen's mouth. However, Yurong's raised right hand quickly froze. He stared blankly at Zhuowen's eyes. If someone were to look carefully, they would be able to see that the depths of Zhuowen's pupils were emitting a 7-colored light. At this moment, Zhuowen performed the shapeless all-life illusion. His spirit was extremely powerful. Yurong was only a middle-stage divine realm cultivator. How could his spirit be comparable to Zhuowen's? He was instantly tricked. Panda frowned when he saw that Yurong had stopped in place and had not made a move. He slowly walked to Yurong's side. Just as he was about to speak, Yurong's frozen hand suddenly whistled over and slapped Panda's face. Slap. The crisp sound of the slap was heard. Panda covered his red cheek and looked at Yurong in a daze. He couldn't imagine that Yurong dared to slap him in return. The audience fell into silence because of this sudden change. No one expected that Yurong, who was supposed to teach Zhuan a lesson, would suddenly hit Panda. "Little bastard, you offended my young master. You don't put our Pan family in your eyes. Today, I'll slap you 100 times to teach you a lesson. You'll remember it in the future." Panda didn't even have time to react. Yurong's mouth was full of a sneer. He slapped Panda's face again. Yurong's slap was merciless. This slap almost caused Panda to stagger and almost fall to the ground. "Yurong, you're crazy!" Panda roared in anger. Unfortunately, Yurong's terrifying aura suppressed Panda's body, making it difficult for him to move. In the next moment, Yurong's palm slaps landed on Panda's face like a storm. Soon, Panda's face was swollen and blood spurted out. There were also many broken teeth mixed in with blood. "Yurong, stop!" Panda's other subordinate, Zhou shouted angrily and rushed towards Yurong. He wanted to stop Yurong, who had suddenly gone crazy. Zhou turned to look at Zhou, who was rushing over, and cast another illusion. Zhou immediately fell for it. "Zhou, Yurong has gone crazy. Stop him quickly." Seeing Zhou rushing over, a glimmer of hope appeared in Panda's eyes. He vaguely begged for help. Bang! However, as soon as Panda finished speaking, Zhou kicked him fiercely, directly trampling him to the ground. "Little bastard, I am trying to save my young master. How dare you block my way? Get out of my way!" Zhou's eyes were tyrannical. He stepped on Panda's chest and directly stepped on him. Panda spat out a mouthful of blood, and then screamed like a pig being slaughtered. This scene shocked everyone present. They did not expect that Yurong and Zhou, who originally wanted to teach Zhuan a lesson, would suddenly go crazy and attack their young master. Zhuan lightly landed on the white jade platform. He gently bowed to Moyan Wuxiang and said, "Miss Wuxiang, this person brought this upon himself. Now he has received his retribution. I wonder if Miss Wuxiang would like to invite me in for a chat?" Moyan Wuxiang looked deeply at the young man in front of him. He knew that Yurong and Zhou's sudden madness had something to do with this young man. Everyone present also sensed that something was amiss. Fear surged in their eyes as they looked at Zhuan. "Stop!" When Zhuan rushed onto the platform, Qi Wei, who had been watching the show, suddenly rushed out from his seat. His hands were unknowingly holding two swords. He rushed to the middle of Yurong and Zhou, and then fiercely swung his swords. Bang bang! Zhou and Yurong, who were originally jointly beating up Panda, groaned and retreated dozens of steps. Then they completely recovered. This young master. Only then did Yurong and Zhou come to their senses. Looking at Panda, who was on the verge of death, they instantly understood what they had done. On the platform, Zhuan looked at Qi Wei in surprise. Although Qi Wei was a middle-stage Divine Realm expert, his strength was much stronger than an ordinary middle-stage Divine Realm expert. No wonder he was a genius of the Hall of Gods. At this moment, Moyan Wuxiang was still somewhat hesitant. Although the young man in front of her had helped her, she did not know this young man. She was not in the mood to chat with him. However, a voice transmission made Moyan Wuxiang's delicate body tremble. "Wuxiang, I am Zhuan." Moyan Wuxiang stared at the young man in front of her in disbelief. She did not see any similarities between this young man and Zhuan. However, she knew that the voice transmission was indeed Zhuan's voice. After calming himself down, Moyan Wuxiang opened his mouth and said, "This young master is very capable. It is Wuxiang's honor to be able to chat with young master." After saying that, Moyan Wuxiang stepped forward and grabbed the young man's arm. Then she walked into the inner room below the platform. Could it be that my eyes are playing tricks on me? The pure Miss Wuxiang actually took the initiative to hold the hand of a strange man? There was an uproar around the platform. Panda, who had been beaten very badly, naturally saw this scene. He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood and directly fainted. Qi Wei, who was standing not far away, looked at Zhuan's back. His eyes were full of fear. He knew very well that this young man was definitely not simple to be able to make Yurong and Zhou unconscious without anyone noticing. Although Zhuan's aura was only that of a demigod, Qi Wei had already determined that this person was a powerful divine realm expert, who was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. The mysterious black-robed man, who had been hiding in the dark, frowned and whispered, "It seems that Moyan Wuxiang and this young man know each other. I just don't know what their relationship is." Chapter 1927. Fire Spirit Juice. Moyan Wuxiang turned her head and looked at the young man in front of her with her beautiful eyes. She asked with uncertainty, "Are you really Zhuowen?" Zhuowen smiled and returned to his original appearance. Seeing Zhuowen's true appearance, Moyan Wuxiang's beautiful eyes turned red. She threw herself into Zhuowen's arms. Zhuowen was caught off guard, but he didn't dodge. He gently stroked Moyan Wuxiang's back. He could feel the grievance in Moyan Wuxiang's heart. For 60 years, Moyan Wuxiang supported the entire heavenly armor planet. She also had to face the pressure of Huang Danxing. She even had to come to the main planet to perform. Zhuowen knew that Moyan Wuxiang was under a lot of pressure. This pressure should have been Zhuowen's, but it was transferred to Moyan Wuxiang. Zhuowen felt a little guilty. "Wuxiang, you've worked hard for the past 60 years. Zhuowen sighed. Moyan Wuxiang calmed down and left Zhuowen's arms. Her face was flushed. In the eyes of outsiders, Moyan Wuxiang had always been very strong, not to mention crying. But in front of Zhuowen, Moyan Wuxiang's strength always turned into nothingness. She revealed her grievance and weakness because she could find a sense of security in Zhuowen. "It's not hard. By the way, Brother Zhuo, what happened to you in the past 60 years? Why didn't you come back? And your cultivation?" Moyan Wuxiang just noticed that Zhuowen's cultivation was only a demigod. But she had seen Zhuowen's power with her own eyes. She knew that Zhuowen's strength was not simple. Zhuowen told her what had happened in the past few years. This time, he planned to take Moyan Wuxiang and the people of Heavenly Armor Planet away. He didn't hide the matter of the infant Devour. When Moyan Wuxiang heard that Zhuowen had possessed the infant Devour, she couldn't help but be shocked. "By the way, Wuxiang, you've been in the Long River Galaxy for 60 years. Do you know where most of the stars in the galaxy are located?" Zhuowen wanted to become a heavenly god, so he needed 9 stars. Previously, when he rushed to Long River Star, he did not investigate the stars in Long River Star System. Moreover, he did not see many stars along the way. Clearly, there were not many stars in this star system. "There aren't many stars in the Long Galaxy, but I know that there is a place Fire Cloud Domain in the south. It is a dangerous place, where stars are gathered. The distance between each star and the stars is star. And the distance between star and star is, the distance between star and God, is. Moyan Wuxiang looked at Zhuowen strangely and said, "Brother Zhuo, why are you asking this? Do you need a star? Stars?" Zhuowen smiled and said, "You're right. I do need a star. It's very troublesome for an infant Devourer to become a sky god. Ordinary life planets have too little star power. They can't combine with the infant Devourer's soul to form star god power. I need a star, and I need 9 of them." Moyan Wuxiang was shocked. He thought that Devourer was crazy. Ordinary sky gods only needed 1 life planet to become a sky god. Devourer not only needed a star, but he also needed 9 stars. This was crazy. "This is the star map of the Blazing Cloud region. Big Brother Zhuo, if you want to go there, just follow the star map. However, the temperature there is too high. I suggest you buy some ice-type pills." Ink Words of War suggested. "You'd better buy some ice-type pills," Ink Words of War suggested. Zhuowen nodded. He had a lot of godstones on him. He could go to the Long River store and buy some ice pills or artifacts just in case. After all, if he went to the Fire Cloud Domain with his body, it would be too ostentatious. Zhuowen put away the star map and took out 200,000 godstones from his spirit ring. He gave them to Moyan Wuxiang and said, "Wuxiang, I have a lot of godstones. You don't have to perform in the Grace Pavilion anymore. When I become a sky god, I'll take you and leave China." 200,000? That's a lot. Moyan Wuxiang took the storage pouch and found that there were indeed 200,000 godstones. He couldn't help but exclaim. But soon he calmed down. Zhuowen had taken over Devourer's body. 200,000 godstones was nothing to Zhuowen. But soon Moyan Wuxiang looked hesitant. Zhuowen saw it and asked, Wuxiang, what's wrong? Moyan Wuxiang sighed and said, Brother Zhua, the reason why I'm allowed to perform here without being coveted is because I signed an agreement with the owner of the Grace Pavilion. I have to perform here for 50 years before I can leave. I've only been here for 20 years. There are still 30 years left. Zhuowen frowned. He didn't expect Wuxiang to sign such an agreement. How strong is the owner of the Grace Pavilion? Zhuowen frowned and asked. Moyan Wuxiang sighed and said, The owner should be at the peak of the Sky God realm. He's at the peak of the main star. His position is very high, so... Although Moyan Wuxiang knew that Zhuowen wasn't simple, Zhuowen hadn't reached the divine transformation realm. There was still a big gap between him and the peak of the Sky God realm. Zhuowen frowned. If he was at the divine transformation realm, he wouldn't care about the peak of the Sky God realm. But now he might have to expose Devour's body to fight against the peak of the Sky God realm. This wasn't the result that Zhuowen wanted. Who is it? Zhuowen's eyes suddenly turned cold as he asked in a deep voice. Sure enough, your divine sense is very powerful. A coquettish voice came from outside the pavilion. Then the door opened automatically and a woman with limpid eyes came in. This woman's appearance could only be considered top-notch, but the faintly discernible charm that flowed from her eyes gave her an indescribable charm. Owner! Moyan Wuxiang exclaimed. You're the owner of the Grace Pavilion? Zhuowen looked at the woman in front of him in surprise. His divine sense was very powerful. He had noticed this woman as soon as she arrived. Moreover, the important conversation between him and Moyan Wuxiang had been told by Zhuowen after he had set up a shielding array. So he wasn't worried that this woman would hear it. The woman smiled sweetly and sat down on a seat not far away. She looked at Zhuowen with a sweet smile and said, I am indeed the pavilion master of the Douya Pavilion. When you were outside earlier, you should have cast an illusion on Yurong and Zhuowen, right? You were there at that time? Zhuowen frowned and asked. The woman shook her head and said, I guessed it from my subordinate's description. To be able to make two intermediate divine realm warriors fall into an illusion. Your divine sense is very powerful. Zhuowen was silent. He really couldn't guess why the owner of the Grace Pavilion had come uninvited. The woman didn't feel the slightest bit embarrassed because of Zhuowen's silence. She looked at Moyan Wuxiang and said, Wuxiang and I signed a 50-year agreement. It is reasonable to say that I have to fulfill it. However, I am in a good mood this time, so I cancelled the agreement. Moyan Wuxiang's beautiful eyes were filled with joy. However, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He said indifferently, Owner is really generous. I wonder how I can repay you? The woman smiled and said, Smart. In fact, I came here to invite you to go to the Burning Cloud territory. I need your powerful illusion. Zhuowen was surprised. He didn't expect that the owner of the Grace Pavilion would also want to go to the Burning Cloud territory. But what was the purpose of the owner of the Grace Pavilion going to the Burning Cloud territory? You will know when you see this. Seeing that Zhuowen was still silent, the woman handed a jade slip to Zhuowen. After receiving the jade slip, Zhuowen looked at the contents and was moved. The contents of the jade slip roughly said that the fire spirit juice had appeared in the Burning Cloud territory. Although Zhuowen didn't know about it, the jade slip clearly stated that this divine item could increase the chances of becoming a true god. Just this characteristic of increasing the chances of becoming a true god was enough to make countless divine realm warriors go crazy. After Zhuowen returned the jade slip to the woman, he said, Are you so sure that I will cooperate with you? The woman smiled charmingly and said, My sixth sense tells me that you will definitely cooperate with me. What if I don't cooperate? What will you do? Zhuowen sneered and said. The woman said calmly, Of course I won't do anything to you. However, other than me, the 4 Vice Star Lords also know about this. If they know that you know about this and don't cooperate, I can't guarantee that they will be as calm as I am. Zhuowen squinted his eyes. The woman in front of him wasn't simple. Although her words sounded casual, there was actually a hidden threat. However, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't fall for it. However, he was going to the Burning Cloud territory anyway. It was on the way to go with the owner of the Grace Pavilion. If he could get the fire spirit juice in the Burning Cloud territory, it couldn't be better. Although he hadn't become a divine realm warrior, he knew that the fire spirit juice was very valuable. Even if he didn't need it now, he would definitely need it in the future. When do we depart? Zhuowen asked faintly. The woman revealed a sweet smile and said, 3 months later. This time, I am cooperating with the 4 Dark Star Lords. Therefore, each of us is allowed to bring 1 person. Originally, I didn't care about you too much. However, since you were able to discover me so quickly, it shows that your divine soul is very powerful. On top of that, you know illusions. That's why I decided to cooperate with you. Zhuowen nodded and continued. I am merely a demigod. Entering a dangerous place like the Burning Cloud territory is definitely extremely risky. I believe that Lord Pavilion Master should have a pretty good compensation for me. The woman's beautiful eyes narrowed. She continued to smile and said, Is it not enough to waive Wu Shang's agreement? 1 million divine stones. And I also need 10 spirit congealing pills. Moreover, I don't have any divine artifacts on me. Forge a sword-shaped divine artifact for me. Furthermore, it must be a mid-level divine artifact or above. Zhuowen demanded an exorbitant price. The woman was silent for a moment. Then she continued to smile and said, Sure, I can satisfy all of these things. I haven't asked for your name yet. I am the owner of the Grace Pavilion, Xiang Mengchun. Little brother, what about you? Long one, Zhuowen said concisely. In these 3 months, I will arrange a place for you to stay. Also, I will help you take care of that panda's problem. You only need to be at ease and wait until 3 months later. This is the Pavilion Master's token. With this token, you can freely enter and exit the Grace Pavilion. You can even come to the Pavilion Master's building to find me. Chapter 1928. Dark stare in the dim room. A rather strong figure sat cross-legged quietly. Around this figure, a golden gas lingered. The golden yellow gas was continuously pouring into the body of the silhouette. As the golden qi poured into the figure's naked body became dazzling, as if it was gilded. The effect of the mysterious yellow qi is really good. It only took me 10 days to cultivate the mysterious yellow immortal to the Hotian level. Zhuowen stood up and put on his clothes. His eyes flickered as he looked at the dim golden qi. He shook his head and muttered to himself. It's just that I underestimated Devour's body. Just the first level of the mysterious yellow immortal used up such a large bottle of mysterious yellow qi. Generally speaking, with so much black and yellow qi, it should be easy to cultivate the indestructible black and yellow indestructible art to the Hotian realm. However, Zhuowen's body was different. It was Devour's body, which was much stronger than a cultivator's body. Relying on the mysterious yellow immortal to improve his body was much more difficult than a cultivator's. This was also the reason why Zhuowen used so much mysterious yellow qi to reach the first level. Zhuowen knew very well that if he wanted to advance to the second stage of the Xiantian realm, he would need 10 times the amount of Xianhuang qi. In other words, he would need 10 of the largest bottles of Xianhuang qi, which would be worth 2 million. Currently, Zhuowen couldn't take out so much mysterious yellow qi. However, Zhuowen knew that Dio Pavilion could definitely take it out. When he opened the door, he saw that the sky was already bright. In the courtyard, Moyan Wushang sat quietly in the pavilion. A zither was placed in front of the table. His slender jade-like hands were plucking the strings. The melodious music was like flowing water, floating in the courtyard. Zhuowen stood in the courtyard, quietly listening to the music. When the music stopped, Moyan Wushang looked at Zhuowen in surprise and said, Brother Zhuowen, you've come out of seclusion? Zhuowen nodded and said, Wushang, I need to go find Xiang Mengchun. In the hall, Zhuowen sat casually on a chair. Then, a charming woman walked in from outside the hall. It was Xiang Mengchun. Little brother Long, it's only been 10 days and you've come to find me. Why are you in such a hurry to ask for those things? Xiang Mengchun smiled. Zhuowen Moyan Wushang. If you haven't, I can wait. Bye. This time I have another matter to attend to. What? Xiang Mengchun asked. Xiang Mengchun. Zhuowen. Xiang Mengchun's beautiful eyes narrowed. After a moment of silence, she gritted her teeth and said, All right, I'll send someone to deliver it to you when the time comes. Also, I've already prepared the things you wanted. I wanted to send them over later, but I didn't expect you to come in person. Xiang was Xiang Zhuan took the storage pouch and checked it. Other than the 1,000,000 godstones, there was also a palm-sized jade bottle and a black iron sword. Zhuan took out the jade bottle, opened the cork, and found that there were 10 dark red pills in the jade bottle. He knew that this should be the spirit congealing pill he wanted. The spirit congealing pill was a kind of pill that could help people reach the soul formation stage. Demigod cultivators who ate the spirit congealing pill had a great chance of reaching the soul formation stage. These 10 spirit congealing pills, Zhuan did not keep them for himself. His soul was extremely powerful, and what he refined was not a life planet, but a star. The spirit congealing pill did not have much effect on him. He wanted the spirit congealing pill, mainly for Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Yuan Hongwen and others. Then Zhuan held the black iron sword. The sword was simple and unadorned, but he could feel that it contained an extraordinary sharpness. High-quality heavenly divine artifact, Iron Dew Sword. Zhuan looked at the name on the sword, muttered in a low voice, waved it casually, and then cupped his fist to Xiang Mengchun. No matter what purpose Xiang Mengchun had for inviting him to the Fire Cloud territory, to be able to agree to his request unconditionally, it was enough to show Xiang Mengchun's sincerity. Little brother Long-One, I am very sincere to you. When you go to the Fire Cloud territory, you have to show enough sincerity. Xiang Mengchun chuckled. Pavilion Master Xiang, don't worry. Since Pavilion Master Xiang treats me with sincerity, I will not be ungrateful. Zhuan said. Xiang Mengchun nodded with satisfaction and said, You can go back first. The mysterious yellow qi will be delivered later. After bidding farewell to Xiang Mengchun, Zhuan left Xiang Mengchun's pavilion. Xiang Mengchun was extremely efficient. On the night Zhuan returned, 10 bottles of mysterious yellow qi were delivered. Zhuan spent 20 days to completely absorb the 10 bottles of mysterious yellow qi into his body, and his mysterious yellow immortal also reached the second level of the Xiantian realm as scheduled. At this moment, Zhuan's body was much stronger than before. Perhaps even a peak heavenly god would find it difficult to injure Zhuan. Once Zhuan became a heavenly god, he would be an invincible existence among heavenly gods. No matter how powerful a heavenly god was, or even a fake true god like the 4 Vice-Star Lords, they would not necessarily be a match for Zhuan. After becoming a heavenly god, Zhuan would be able to absorb the adult devour's power in the Eye of Heaven Devour. He estimated that absorbing the adult devour's power would allow Zhuan's cultivation to soar to the late heavenly god realm in a short time. With devour's talent and body, the late heavenly god realm Zhuan would be extremely terrifying. A true god like Qi, the ruler of the Long River Galaxy, who had not even passed a single calamity, would not be a match for Zhuan. Even Jing Hai of the 9th Heaven Palace in the Taiqing Immortal Realm might not necessarily be a match for Zhuan. After cultivating the mysterious yellow immortal to the innate realm, Zhuan summoned Yin Tianwei from the spirit ring. When she came out, Yin Tianwei was still a little absent-minded. She had stayed in the spirit ring for more than 60 years. She thought that Zhuan had long forgotten about her, and she no longer had any expectations for Zhuan. Now that she was released, Yin Tianwei felt like she was dreaming. Tianwei, now that I have the ability to help you change your physique, are you willing to do it? Zhuan asked. Yin Tianwei's eyes were filled with excitement. She hastily said, I am willing. Over the next 5 days, Zhuan used the indestructible profound yellow immortal cultivation method to cleanse Yin Tianwei's marrow and meridians, forcing out many of the impurities in Yin Tianwei's body. Zhuan also used his divine power to reconstruct Yin Tianwei's meridians, and used his divine soul to change Yin Tianwei's talent. 5 days later, when Yin Tianwei woke up, she found that Zhuan was no longer in the room. Only Zhuan's voice remained in her mind. I have something to do. Your physique and meridians have been completely transformed. You now have the potential to cultivate. Moreover, I have used the divine stones to raise your cultivation to the earth immortal realm. From now on, you can only rely on yourself to cultivate. Yin Tianwei's face flushed red. and she was so excited that her whole body trembled. She could finally cultivate. Zhuowen had really helped her transform her physique. Thank you, Zhuowen. Yin Tianwei murmured in a low voice. Outside the heavenly armor planet, Zhuowen hovered in the starry sky with Moyan Wuxiang beside him. Brother Zhua, are you really going to let Yin Tianwei go? Moyan Wuxiang asked softly. After transforming Yin Tianwei's physique, Zhuowen brought her back to the heavenly armor planet. The home planet was not suitable for Yin Tianwei to live on, and Yin Tianwei was originally a part of celestial armor planet. That was why Zhuowen decided to bring Yin Tianwei back. Yin Tianwei would have to depend on herself in the future. She is just a pitiful creature who lives with an obsession. That is why she was used by Yang Yi. Now that her obsession is complete and she has lost the divination's sacred symbol, she will not be a threat to the heavenly armor continent. Zhuowen smiled. Moyan Wuxiang nodded gently and said, Brother Zhua, are you really going to follow Pavilion Master Xiang to burn the cloud region? Can I go with you? No. It is too dangerous there. It is not suitable for you. Go back to the heavenly armor planet and wait for me. Don't talk about me for now. When I return, I will explain everything to them. Zhuowen said in a low voice. Moyan Wuxiang did not say much and only nodded. She understood Zhuowen's character. Once he had made up his mind, he would not change his mind easily. After giving Moyan Wuxiang some more instructions, Zhuowen stepped on the astrolabe and left the heavenly armor planet. He was going to use the remaining time to go to the Dark Star. From Tan Yu's memory, he knew that the Dark Star had left a scabbard 60 years ago. Zhuowen suspected that it was Xiao He, so he had to go. Not long after Zhuowen left, a mysterious black-robed man appeared in the darkness far away from the heavenly armor planet. His dark eyes stared at Moyan Wuxiang, who had just returned to the heavenly armor planet. The Dark Star, as its name suggested, was a planet that was mostly covered in black fog. Every day, the weather was gloomy and dark. It was extremely strange. The moment he entered the Dark Star, Zhuowen's eyes became excited. He realized that the vague connection between him and Xiao He had become clear at this moment. Landing on a dark rock, Zhuowen closed his eyes and quietly sensed the connection between him and Xiao He. The moment Zhuowen opened his eyes, he rushed towards a direction. The moment he rushed out, Zhuowen's appearance had completely changed. This was the territory of the Dark Star Lord. Xiang Mengchun had cooperated with the Dark Star Lord. In order not to attract the Dark Star Lord's attention, Zhuowen had chosen to change his appearance. About 1,000,000 feet away from Zhuowen, there was a huge black gully. In this black gully, black flames burned fiercely. If one looked carefully, one could see that in the black flames burning in the gully, there were many long swords. However, most of these long swords were broken, as if they could break at any time under the burning of the black flames. At this moment, there were many cultivators gathered around the gully. Some of the more powerful cultivators had already rushed into the black flames, as if they were looking for something. However, the black flames here were very terrifying. Not long after a middle-stage heavenly god rushed into the gully, he retreated in an extremely sorry state. He stared at the black flames in the gully in horror. Chapter 1929. Gully. It said that 60 years ago, a scabbard rushed into the Dark Star. Later on, many heavenly gods searched for it, but there were no clues at all. I've heard of this before. Legend has it that the scabbard might be an extremely powerful divine object. Back then, many heavenly gods who searched for it died an unnatural death. I'm afraid it was the scabbard that killed them. Furthermore, according to the Dark Star Lord's recent speculation, the scabbard might very well be in this gully. Unfortunately, the black flames in this gully are too terrifying. Those below the late stage of the heavenly god realm won't be able to last long inside. Even late-stage heavenly gods won't be able to enter this gully. Can't you see that everyone in this gully is the Dark Star Lord's men? Although they didn't say anything, this place is actually equivalent to being sealed. Other late-stage heavenly gods don't dare to enter at all. Around the gully, the cultivators were discussing spiritedly. They were all cultivators below the late stage of the heavenly god realm. They didn't have the ability to enter the black flames, so they could only watch. Some discerning people could tell at a glance that the cultivators searching in the gully were basically people sent by the Dark Star Lord. In order to search for the scabbard, the Dark Star Lord had even sent out Wuxia. Wuxia was a peak heavenly god. His strength was extremely terrifying. He was one of the few peak heavenly god experts in the Dark Star Palace. Even in the entire Dark Star, Wuxia's battle strength could be ranked in the top 10. He was an existence that no one dared to provoke. Zhuowen quickly arrived at the gully. When he saw that there were thousands of cultivators surrounding the gully, he couldn't help but be stunned. He had been following Xiaohei's aura all this time. He didn't expect so many cultivators to be gathered here. However, Zhuowen didn't care why these cultivators were gathered here. He could sense that his connection with Xiaohei was getting closer and closer. Xiaohei was in this gully. Thinking of this, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and immediately rushed into the gully. Zhuowen's arrival naturally attracted the attention of many cultivators around the ravine. However, after discovering that Zhuowen was only a demigod, they did not pay much attention to him. However, the moment Zhuowen rushed into the gully, the crowd burst into an uproar. Everyone looked at Zhuowen, who had suddenly rushed into the gully, as if they were looking at a fool. Is this guy courting death? He dived into the gully the moment he arrived. Truly, the ignorant are fearless. There is no need for the people from the Dark Star Palace to do anything. This person will be burned to death by the black flames here. Everyone who came back to their senses sneered, thinking that this fellow who had suddenly barged in was dead meat. Within the gully, the cultivators of the Dark Star Palace who were still searching also raised their heads and noticed Zhuowen who had entered. Who is this person? Asked a man with a cold expression. He was wearing dark armor and carrying a large spear on his back. He pointed at Zhuowen who had plunged into the gully. Lord Wuxia, I don't know him either. Perhaps he is a guy who has just arrived and doesn't understand the situation. A mere demigod dares to enter this place. He is simply courting death, said a cultivator of the Dark Star Palace indifferently. Wuxia glanced at Zhuowen and ignored him. However, he quickly turned his head again and stared at the young man who had fallen into the black flames and was completely unharmed. This guy is actually fine. Wuxia frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice in surprise. Not only Wuxia, but the surrounding cultivators of the Dark Star Palace also noticed the strangeness of the demigod cultivator who had fallen. The cultivators around the gully who had been waiting to watch a good show were all stunned, especially when they saw Zhuowen strolling leisurely in the black flames. They could not figure out how a mere demigod like Zhuowen could withstand the terrifying black flames. After entering the black flames, Zhuowen also felt the terror of the surrounding black flames. However, his physical body was strong and he had cultivated the indestructible heaven and earth. Although the black flames were strong, Zhuowen's physical body was even stronger. It did not affect Zhuowen at all. Xiaohei should be here. Zhuowen walked slowly and finally arrived at the center of the gully. At this moment, there was a broken sword standing in the middle of the gully. The broken sword was covered in cracks, as if it would shatter at any time if it was held in one's hand. No one would notice such a broken sword. Wuxia of the Dark Star Palace had naturally been here before. However, he did not even look at the broken sword. After all, the broken sword was too broken. Who would care about such a broken sword? Zhuowen silently stared at the broken sword in front of him and revealed a thoughtful expression. He realized that Xiaohei's aura was in this broken sword. Just as Zhuowen was about to make a move, the cultivators of the Dark Star Palace who were originally scattered around gathered around Zhuowen and stared coldly at Zhuowen. There were a total of 20 cultivators of the Dark Star Palace who had entered the gully to search. Other than the man with the great spear who was a peak heavenly god, the other 19 cultivators of the Dark Star Palace were all late heavenly gods. Although Zhuowen did not know the origins of these people, he could guess from their uniform that they should be from the same faction. Everyone, what is the meaning of this? Zhuowen asked with a frown. Wuxia slowly walked out and stared indifferently at Zhuowen. He said, "You are very bold. Our Dark Star Palace is conducting business here, and you dare to barge in so openly. Are you looking down on our Dark Star Palace? I am just a newcomer and do not know the rules." Just as Zhuowen was about to say something, Wuxia immediately interrupted him. Destroy your Dantian, and get out of here. After Wuxia said that, the surrounding cultivators of the Dark Star Palace all roared with laughter. They looked at Zhuowen with ridicule. I don't think I have offended you at all. I just accidentally barged in here, and you want me to destroy my Dantian? Zhuowen said with a cold gaze. Lord Wuxia is already showing you the greatest tolerance by saying this. Since you don't want to listen, then die. A cultivator of the Dark Star Palace behind Zhuowen sneered. He formed a palm with his right hand and chopped at Zhuowen's head. This person did not hold back at all. His palm was enough to explode Zhuowen's head and destroy his divine soul. However, before this person's palm could land on Zhuowen's head, a purplish-black lightning suddenly shot out. It was extremely fast and instantly drilled into the center of this person's brows. Bang! Then this person fell to the ground and lost his life. The surroundings fell into silence. The expressions of the other cultivators of the Dark Star Palace who had ridicule in their eyes froze as they stared blankly at their dead companion. They really could not understand. This demigod in front of them actually had the strength to kill a cultivator in the late heavenly god realm. It was really unbelievable. You killed him. Wuxia's eyes were filled with killing intent. He pulled out the great spear on his back with his right hand. With a shake of his right hand, the spear in Wuxia's hand shot toward Zhuowen like a shuttle. At the same time, the surrounding 18 cultivators of the Dark Star Palace all took out their respective heavenly god artifacts and attacked Zhuowen. However, at the moment when Wuxia attacked, Zhuowen immediately used the illusory technique from the shapeless all beings. Moreover, the illusory technique was much more terrifying than before with the support of the 4th level Dao intent. Wuxia, who was swinging his spear, was instantly confused by the illusory technique. However, Wuxia was a peak heavenly god after all. His divine soul was much stronger than other heavenly gods. Therefore, he came back to his senses in an instant. At the moment when Wuxia was in a daze, Zhuowen did not hold back at all. He immediately used the 4th level Dao intent, and pulled out the Iron Dew sword. He used the 3rd sword move of the Dao of Destruction sword technique, Sun at Noon. At this moment, Zhuowen swung his sword. The powerful sword qi condensed into 17 terrifying blazing suns. They spun continuously and swept toward the 17 late heavenly gods of the Dark Star Palace. At the same time, Zhuowen opened the Eye of Heaven's Devourer and released 17 purplish-black lightning bolts. They were hidden in the 17 blazing suns silently. When the 17 cultivators of the Dark Star Palace blocked their respective blazing suns, the purplish-black lightning bolts hidden in the blazing suns shot out. They entered the 17 cultivators' foreheads at an extremely fast speed. With the power of the purplish-black lightning, their divine souls were instantly annihilated. All of this happened in an instant. Using the Eye of Heaven's Devourer, Sun at Noon, and the illusory technique at the same time was an extremely heavy burden for the current Zhuowen. His face instantly turned pale. Die. Just as Zhuowen was in a weakened state after killing the 17 cultivators of the Dark Star Palace in an instant, Wuxia charged over with a terrifying spear aura. The spear struck Zhuowen's chest. Zhuowen avoided a vital point. The spear pierced between his ribs. However, to Wuxia's horror, the spear only pierced about 3 inches between Zhuowen's ribs before it was blocked by the contracted muscles between his ribs. Your physical body. Before Wuxia could react, Zhuowen held the Iron Dew sword in his hand. He streaked across the air and instantly slashed at Wuxia's neck. Wuxia was a peak heavenly god expert after all. He kicked off with his right foot, and immediately abandoned the spear that was clamped between Zhuowen's muscles. He then dodged to the side to avoid Zhuowen's Iron Dew sword. However, the moment Wuxia dodged the Iron Dew sword, Zhuowen immediately used his powerful divine soul to activate the soul-absorbing god needle. The needle had always existed in his divine soul. At this moment, it turned into a golden light that shot out from between his eyebrows and instantly blasted into Wuxia's forehead. Wuxia had never imagined that such a needle would suddenly shoot out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. The moment the needle shot out, he could only watch helplessly as it pierced through his forehead, destroying his divine soul and turning it into mush. You're not a demigod expert at all. Wuxia could not rest in peace. Zhuowen's soul-absorbing god needle was too fast and too unexpected. He had died too unjustly. Plop! Wuxia fell to the ground. The soul-absorbing god needle shot back into between his eyebrows. His gaze was extremely cold as he looked at Wuxia, who had died with his eyes wide open. Hiss! Suddenly, everyone around the gully was dumbfounded. Then there was a series of gasps. Among the 20 experts of the Dark Star Palace, there was Wuxia, who was a peak heavenly god, and 19 cultivators who were in the late heavenly god stage. Such a lineup had been instantly killed. Everyone was guessing who this guy who only had the aura of a demigod on the surface was. After swiftly putting away the spirit rings of Wuxia and the others, Zhuowen came in front of the broken sword and casually kicked it. He then realized that his kick had missed. Chapter 1930. Dark Cultivation Orchid Brat. You've improved a lot, haven't you? You haven't even become a heaven god yet, but you're already able to kill a peak stage heaven god. Looks like you've successfully possessed Devour. The instant the broken sword dodged Zhuowen's right foot, Xiao Hei's voice rang in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen withdrew his right foot, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He knew that Xiao Hei should be inside this broken sword. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that this broken sword was extremely broken, so how did Xiao Hei enter this broken sword? And what about blood splatter 5 steps? Perhaps Xiao Hei understood Zhuowen's doubts, so he explained, Brat, don't underestimate this broken sword. If I'm not wrong, this sword is probably a powerful virtual Sky Realm cultivator's divine object. It's just that it's a bit broken now, but it's still much stronger than ordinary heavenly god tools. Zhuowen was startled, and a trace of doubt appeared in his eyes. How could a virtual Sky Realm cultivator's divine object exist on this insignificant dark star? Moreover, this broken sword didn't have any aura at all. It was simply a broken sword. What about blood splatter 5 steps? Zhuowen asked. Xiao Hei said somewhat awkwardly, blood splatter 5 steps has already been refined and integrated into this broken sword. Brat, if you pull this broken sword out, I can help you completely refine this broken sword and make it yours. Zhuowen sighed softly. Blood splatter 5 steps had helped him a lot in the past. Thinking about how it had already been integrated into this broken sword, Zhuowen couldn't help but feel somewhat regretful. Let me try. Zhuowen didn't doubt Xiao Hei's words. He had gone through thick and thin with Xiao Hei for many years, so he knew very well that Xiao Hei wouldn't harm him. Holding the sword hilt, Zhuowen suddenly exerted force. Immediately after, he was shocked to find that the broken sword was stuck in the ground and didn't move at all. Brat. This sword is very heavy. If you use all your strength, Devour Larva's strength shouldn't be so little, right? Xiao Hei suddenly said. Hearing this, Zhuowen no longer held back. Blue veins bulged on his right hand as a vast and terrifying aura gushed out from Zhuowen's body. He had used all of Devour's power. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire gully began to tremble violently. The black flames within the gully continued to wreak havoc, turning into a black firestorm. With Zhuowen as the center, the storm continued to spread out in all directions. What's going on? Let's leave quickly. These black flames aren't something we can resist. That cultivator must have found something in the gully, otherwise it would have been impossible for the black flames in the gully to become so violent. The pupils of the cultivators who were originally surrounding the ravine shrank as they flew up and scattered in all directions. Cultivators below the late heavenly god stage would basically be unable to escape from these black flames. Therefore, these cultivators naturally fled without a trace. Zhuowen lifted the broken sword with great difficulty. Soon after, he found a line of blood flowing out from the hilt of the broken sword. It flowed through his palm and entered his body. Then he felt that he and the broken sword were connected by blood. Moreover, he really did feel the aura of blood splashing 5 steps from the broken sword. Xiao Hei was right. Blood splashing 5 steps had merged with the broken sword. After the line of blood entered his body, he found that the originally unbearably heavy broken sword was as light as a feather. Whoosh! Whoosh! At the same time, the countless long swords stuck in the ground in the gully all flew out. As the black firestorm soared into the sky, they all scattered, causing the black firestorm to become even more violent. Zhuowen, leave this place immediately. That Dark Star Lord has probably already sensed us. That guy is a false true god. He's much stronger than a peak heavenly god, Xiaohe suddenly said anxiously. Zhuowen didn't even think about it. He followed the eye of the black firestorm and flew up into the sky. The black firestorm was too intense. Looking from the outside, it was as black as ink. It was impossible to see Zhuowen's figure clearly inside. Whoosh! A terrifying wind-breaking sound suddenly swept over from afar. Wherever it passed, wind and thunder intertwined and space cracked. An unimaginably powerful aura followed the wind-breaking sound. The cultivators who were hiding from the black firestorm were shocked. It's Dark Star Lord and Xiulan. I didn't expect that even he would personally take action. Although the wind-breaking sound was still far away, when the terrifying aura spread over, someone immediately recognized the owner of the aura. Zhuowen continued to rise within the storm of black flames. His powerful consciousness immediately sensed the terrifying aura that was rushing over from afar. So powerful. Is this a false true god? Zhuowen was shocked. After killing Wuxia, who was at the peak of the divine realm, Zhuowen didn't think much of the so-called false true gods. But now, when Xiulan rushed over aggressively, Zhuowen felt the terrifying aura. He immediately knew that there was still a certain gap between him and a false true god. Go! Zhuowen kicked with his right foot. His whole body was covered in purple light, and his speed increased sharply. With his current speed, he could quickly sweep out of the eye of the black firestorm and leave the dark star. No matter how fast Xiulan was, he couldn't catch up with Zhuowen. In the distance, Xiulan, who was dressed in armor, stared coldly at Zhuowen, who was escaping in the black firestorm. The corner of his mouth was full of coldness. He clenched his right hand and muttered something. Boom. Suddenly, the ravine where the black firestorm was located collapsed. Then, the cultivators around the ravine were shocked to find that there were countless primordial spirits emerging from the ravine. They also found that these primordial spirits all had the aura of a half-god. In other words, these primordial spirits were all half-gods when they were alive. But now, these primordial spirits' eyes were red and they had no consciousness to speak of. They all fearlessly rushed towards the black firestorm. This is the myriad god soul lock. Some of the surrounding cultivators recognized the strange formation that had suddenly appeared in the ravine. The myriad god soul lock was an extremely vicious formation. This formation required a half-god primordial spirit to activate. Through the accumulation of tens of thousands of primordial spirits, the myriad god soul lock would become extremely terrifying. It could lock the soul of any divine realm expert. Even a peak divine realm expert would find it difficult to escape. This myriad god soul lock is still lacking a few primordial spirits. It's not complete, but even a peak divine realm expert could be frozen by it. It's a vicious and terrifying formation. A cultivator sighed softly. He knew that after the myriad god soul lock formation was activated, that cultivator would not be able to escape. Sure enough, the originally terrifying black firestorm stopped spinning after being surrounded by countless primordial spirits. The eye of the storm was also blocked by countless primordial spirits, blocking Zhuowen's path of ascension. They're all half-god primordial spirits. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He quickly thought of Tanyu from the Dark Star. He knew that the half-gods that Tanyu had taken away probably had their primordial spirits extracted and placed in the formation below the ravine. Kid, this is the myriad god soul lock. That old bastard, the Dark Star Lord, specially set it up for this Lord Dragon. He wants to find this Lord Dragon. Fortunately, this Lord Dragon hid in this broken sword and concealed all of my aura. Otherwise, that old bastard might have found me. Xiaohe could not help but curse. However, it's not that easy to trap this Lord Dragon. Kid, I'll let you see the power of this broken sword. Swing it. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. Although the broken sword's appearance was ugly, he could feel the powerful aura contained within the broken sword. In an instant, Zhuowen slashed out with the sword. Then he realized that the black firestorm that had stopped around him began to explode. Countless amounts of black firestorm overflowed. The countless primordial spirits that were attached to the black firestorm were all destroyed by this terrifying explosion. The black firestorm that reached the sky also completely collapsed, revealing Zhuowen's figure. After destroying the myriad god soul lock, Zhuowen did not stay any longer. He stomped his right foot, and did not reduce his speed, intending to leave the dark star. Unfortunately, when Zhuowen rushed out of the dark star, he realized that an invisible force had appeared between the dark star and the starry sky, preventing him from leaving the planet. "Break for me!" Zhuowen slashed out with his right hand and black flames surged out of the broken sword. The black flames spread from the sword to the broken sword, and used the black flames as a medium to restore the broken sword into a complete black sword. However, the tip of the sword was just a ball of black flames and not the real sword tip. With one slash, the black flames spread and the transparent energy in front of him completely shattered. However, with Zhuowen's delay, Xiaolan had already caught up to him. With a flick of her finger, Xiaolan took out a 3-foot-long pair of black scissors and slashed at Zhuowen's waist in an attempt to cut him in half. Unfortunately, Zhuowen had already sensed it. He used the sword to pierce through the thorns and surrounded himself, forming countless thorns as a defense. Gotcha! The thistles and thorns simply couldn't withstand the dark cultivation orchid's scissors, and immediately crumbled inch by inch, turning into dust. Zhuowen stomped his right foot and dodged Xiaolan's attack. He stared at Xiaolan with fear. Xiaolan's black eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen and muttered in surprise, "Demigod? A mere demigod can dodge my attack?" At this moment, Zhuowen did not retreat. This dark cultivator orchid's spiritual sense had already locked onto him. Moreover, this dark cultivator orchid's speed was not slow. Zhuowen knew that it was too late to escape now. "Hand over the broken sword in your hand, and I will let bygones be bygones for killing my dark star palace." Xiaolan's eyes flashed as he spoke again. He could sense that Zhuowen was not a simple person. He even suspected that Zhuowen had an extremely powerful concealment technique on him. So much so that even he couldn't see through Zhuowen's cultivation base. She knew very well that people like him usually had a powerful background. Hence, she did not want to offend him. However, Zhuowen shook his head and said, "This broken sword was originally obtained by my weapon spirit. Now that I have refined it, it is impossible for you to take it away." Xiaolan frowned but quickly regained her composure and said, "If that is the case, then friend, you can leave. I will not make things difficult for you." Zhuowen was stunned. He didn't expect the dark cultivation orchid to be so easy to talk to. Moreover, after the dark cultivation orchid said those words, the divine sense that had locked onto him also disappeared. Clearly, the dark cultivation orchid really intended to let him go. "Thank you very much." Chapter 1931. Dark Moon. Sometimes these four figures had powerful auras. They were all peak heavenly gods. Moreover, the four of them moved in a mysterious footwork with swords in their hands. They formed a four-man sword formation and instantly sealed off Zhuowen's surroundings. At the same time, Zhuowen realized that Xiaolan's divine sense, which she had retracted, was once again locked onto him. At the same time, an air-piercing sound came from behind him. Zhuowen immediately knew that Xiaolan had no intention of letting him go. She was probably just stalling for time. At the thought of this, Zhuowen immediately used the three sword techniques: sword-piercing brambles, first appearance of sword radiance, and sun in the sky. Countless sword shadows flew out and attacked the four-man sword formation. It had to be said that although the broken sword in Zhuowen's hand did not look like much, the Tao of Destruction sword technique was much stronger than the Iron Lu sword. Clearly, this sword was much stronger than the Iron Lu sword. Bang bang bang. Using the three sword moves at the same time, he managed to block the combined sword formation of the four peak heavenly gods. At the same time, Zhuowen turned around to face Xiaolan. At this moment, Xiaolan took out the extreme scissors again. The scissors cut through the space around Zhuowen, and the space around him collapsed. A black fog spread out and formed a black net, trapping Zhuowen in it. Zhuowen squinted his eyes, and used the Eye of Heaven's Devourer again. The purplish-black lightning exploded into countless strands and spread out, destroying the black net around him. At this moment, Xiulan's attack was about to land. Zhuowen raised his sword and a terrifying black flame burst out from the blade. Bang! Zhuowen groaned and retreated a dozen steps. On the other hand, Xiulan only retreated a single step and continued to charge at Zhuowen. This despicable Xiulan. This dragon lord has not completely merged with the broken sword and cannot fully unleash the sword's power. Otherwise, this dragon lord would have tortured him to death. The instant Zhuowen retreated, Xiaohei's scolding voice rang out, boasting shamelessly. As the dark Azura flew over, Zhuowen silently calculated the distance between him and the dark Azura. When the dark cultivation orchid was only 20 meters away from him, and the giant scissors were just inches away, Zhuowen shot out another soul-absorbing god needle from between his eyebrows. This time, Zhuowen directly gave up on defense. Facing the attack of the scissors, he forcibly took out the soul-absorbing god needle. He was very clear that the dark cultivation orchid was not simple, and that was the only way to achieve an unexpected effect, and the dark cultivation orchid would fall for it. Bang! The black scissors landed on Zhuowen's waist and cut. A metallic sound was heard, and Xiulan was surprised to find that the scissors were unable to cut through Zhuowen's waist. Whoosh! While Xiulan was in a daze, the soul-absorbing godly needle pierced through the air and pierced into her forehead. Poochie! A bloody hole appeared between Xiulan's eyebrows. However, Xiulan's reaction speed was shocking. The moment the soul-absorbing godly needle pierced her forehead, she used her right hand to clamp down on the soul-absorbing godly needle. Even so, the soul-absorbing godly needle was already halfway into her forehead. The terrifying power invaded her soul, causing Xiulan to let out a low growl. Her face filled with pain. Xiulan threw away the soul-absorbing godly needle and immediately retreated with the black scissors. At this moment, her soul had suffered quite a bit of damage. Poochie. At the same time, Zhuowen was also heavily injured by the black scissors. That cut made him feel as if his organs were in a mess, and it was very uncomfortable. After retrieving the soul-absorbing godly needle, Zhuowen immediately left the Dark Star. Kill. At the same time, Zhuowen's three sword moves were broken by the four-peak heavenly god cultivators. Seeing that Zhuowen was about to escape, the four of them instantly surrounded Zhuowen. Scram! Zhuowen was too weak at the moment and did not want to be entangled with the four of them. Furthermore, Xiulan's soul had been injured by him, making it difficult for her divine sense to lock onto him. This was the best time for him to escape. With a swing of the sword, the terrifying black flames in the form of a ring-shaped wave of qi hit the four people around him, causing them to lose their balance. The four of them were shocked, but the killing intent in their eyes was even stronger. The person in front of them was so powerful that he had to die. Therefore, they looked at each other and detonated their respective divine swords. At the cost of the explosion of their divine swords, they formed a trapping array around them. The dark moon appears. Suddenly, a low murmur came from the trapping array. Then, the four people outside the trapping array realized that a crescent moon had risen from within the trapping array. Bang! The moment the crescent moon rose, the trapping array was instantly destroyed. A figure suddenly rushed out and with a swing of his sword, the moon's shadow flickered. One of the cultivators was caught off guard and was confused by the flickering moon's shadow. Then the sharp blade of the sword pierced through his forehead. After killing this cultivator, Zhuowen did not care about the other three-peak heavenly god cultivators who were retreating in shock. He immediately took out his astrolabe and quickly left the Dark Star. By the time the three cultivators reacted, Zhuowen's figure had already disappeared from their line of sight. This battle was very short, but it was very exciting. Many cultivators around the ravine watched this scene in a daze. In the beginning, after Zhuowen killed 19 peak heavenly god cultivators in an instant, they had already overestimated Zhuowen's strength. But now, Xiulan had led 4 peak heavenly god cultivators to intercept Zhuowen. Not only was 1 peak heavenly god cultivator killed, even Xiulan's soul was severely injured. Everyone was secretly guessing who the young man who left was. Star-Lord, are you alright? The 3 peak heavenly god cultivators immediately rushed to Xiulan's side and asked worriedly. At this moment, the bloody hole between Enxiolan's eyebrows had slowly healed. However, Enxiolan knew that the soul-assimilating divine needle was not simple. There was an extremely strange power within it that specialized in destroying the soul. Only half of the needle had penetrated into his soul, and it had already severely injured his soul. He could not imagine what would happen if the needle completely penetrated his soul. Even if he did not die, he would become an idiot. "Let's go," Enxiolan said hatefully and immediately left the place. He had to go back and recover his soul. There was only a month and a half left before he went to the Burning Cloud region. He had to fully recover his soul before he went to the Burning Cloud region. Otherwise, he would be at a disadvantage when he went there. After leaving the Dark Star, Zhuowen directly returned to the pavilion in Long River Star Capital. "Little brother Longwen, what happened to you?" Xiang Mingchun happened to see the pale Zhuowen and could not help but ask in surprise. Zhuowen wanted to speak, but he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. When Xiang Mingchun saw this, she immediately took out a pill and stuffed it into Zhuowen's mouth. She said, "This is a level 3 divine pill, snow ginseng pill. Quickly consume it. It can completely suppress the injuries in your body." Zhuowen hesitated for a while, but in the end, he still consumed the snow ginseng pill. Xiang Mingchun needed him to go to the Burning Cloud region. She would not harm him at this time. After consuming the snow ginseng pill, Zhuowen's injuries were slightly better. At least, it was not difficult for him to speak. Zhuowen knew that the snow ginseng pill was so effective that it must be valuable. He could not help but cup his fists at Xiang Mingchun. "Pavilion Master Xiang, thank you." Xiang Mingchun waved her hand and asked curiously, "Little brother Longwen, what happened to you? Why are you in such a sorry state?" Zhuowen smiled and said casually, "I met an enemy on the way and fought with him. After that, I killed him with great difficulty. However, I also suffered some injuries." "I see." Xiang Mingchun nodded but did not ask any more questions. After all, Zhuowen was only a demigod. His enemy was probably a demigod as well. She was not very interested in a battle between demigods. "Little brother Longwen, there is not much time left before we go to the Burning Cloud region. You should recuperate in the pavilion for a while," Xiang Mingchun suggested. Zhuowen nodded. His injuries were not light now. Moreover, he had found Xiaohe. Naturally, he would not walk around casually. After entering the room arranged by Xiang Mingchun, Zhuowen entered seclusion training. At the same time, he also wanted to ask about the origin of this broken sword. Within the room, the broken sword was floating in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen said solemnly, "Xiaohe, tell me about your experiences in these past few years. How did you manage to cross the starry sky with the blood-splashing 5 steps and arrive at the Dark Star?" Xiaohe sat on the broken sword's hilt. She sighed and said, "Actually, I found a stone tablet on the floating rocks near the heavenly armor star. That stone tablet actually contained the cultivation method of the divine sword. I immediately knew that the person who left behind the words on the stone tablet was definitely an almighty person. I trained on the rocks for 20 years and raised the blood-splashing 5 steps to a low-level heavenly divine artifact. Furthermore, I also learned the soaring sky technique. Even without an astrolabe, I was able to cross the starry sky with the soaring sky technique. After I mastered the soaring sky technique, the stone tablet shattered and only a few words were left behind. The general idea was for me to go to the Dark Star and find the Thunder Fire Sword. It was said that the Thunder Fire Sword contained the remaining inheritance. Thus, I entered the Dark Star and found the Thunder Fire Sword. However, all of this was a trap set up by the Thunder Fire Sword. The Thunder Fire Sword's artifact spirit actually wanted to devour me in order to strengthen itself. Fortunately, the Thunder Fire Sword's artifact spirit was too weak. We fought for several tens of years. Finally, half a month ago, I defeated the Thunder Fire Sword. However, because of that, the Thunder Fire Sword's artifact spirit disappeared. The concealment formation around the Thunder Fire Sword was broken and the location of the ravine was exposed. You should be able to guess what happened next. Many cultivators from the Dark Star came to search for the treasure. Even the people from the Dark Star Palace came. If it wasn't for the fact that this master dragon learned the secret technique, to conceal his aura from the Thunder Fire Sword. I might not have been able to deceive them. Hearing Xiaohei's narration, Zhuowen also roughly understood what Xiaohei had experienced. However, he was surprised by the fact that this so-called Thunder Fire Sword's artifact spirit was actually able to cultivate on its own. Furthermore, it even knew how to deceive others to devour other artifact spirits. It was truly inconceivable. However, at the same time, he was also happy for Xiaohei. He knew that Xiaohei had obtained the Thunder Fire Sword's inheritance and was able to cultivate it. Her future prospects would definitely be limitless. Chapter 1932. Thunder Fire Sword. The divine sword cultivation method Xiaohei talked about was very magical. It was said that after the weapon spirit cultivated, not only could it increase the level of the divine sword, but it could also have its own divine skills. In other words, Xiaohei did not need Zhuowen to control it. It could control the Thunder Fire Sword and use all kinds of powerful divine skills. With the current level of the Thunder Fire Sword, if Xiaohei completely absorbed and controlled the Thunder Fire Sword, it could unleash the power of a peak heavenly god. When the time came, if he teamed up with the Thunder Fire Sword, it would not be so difficult to face Dark Cultivation Orchid again. Xiaohei, how long will it take for you to completely merge with the Thunder Fire Sword? Zhuowen suddenly asked Xiaohei. Xiaohei pondered for a while and said, more than a month. When the time comes, even a peak heavenly god would not be a match for me. Zhuowen nodded and put the Thunder Fire Sword into the spirit ring. This time, with Xiaohei's help, he had more confidence in going to the Burning Cloud region in a month and a half. If he could find 9 stars in the Burning Cloud region, he could completely become a heavenly god. When the 4 Vice Star Lords worked together, Zhuowen did not need to worry about them. Even if it was a true god, Zhuowen was not afraid at all. While Zhuowen was in seclusion to heal, Panda sat in the hall with an ugly expression. Yu Rong and Zhou knelt in front of Panda, not daring to even breathe. Young master, this has nothing to do with us. Last time, that guy at the Doya Pavilion was not simple. He had an extremely powerful illusion skill. The 2 of us fell for it and became confused, so. Yu Rong and Zhou trembled as they spoke. Panda's expression was still ugly. He waved his hand and said, get up. Since the 2 of you fell for it so easily, I'm afraid that guy was not a demigod, but a wolf in sheep's clothing. Before Panda could finish his words, a black shadow silently landed in the hall. This was a middle-aged man with cold eyes. He was dressed in brown leather clothes and had a long saber on his back. He looked at Panda indifferently, and did not have the slightest intention of saluting. Young Master Panda, Lord Pantheon is going back in a few months. Are you going back to the Golden Sun Galaxy as well? The middle-aged man asked. Panda furrowed his brows and shook his head. I have to kill the bastard who humiliated me first. Also, Pan Hua, have you investigated the matter I asked you to do? The middle-aged man nodded and said, I've investigated. That person is called Longwen. Right now, he's being protected by Xiang Mengchun. It's very difficult to kill him. Panda was displeased and he said, Xiang Mengchun is just a peak heavenly deity, right? Could it be that a fake true deity like you is afraid of her? The middle-aged man sneered. Xiang Mengchun is not simple. Although she is only at the peak of the heavenly god realm, she is very powerful. Otherwise, do you think she would be able to establish such a large force in the main city? Panda was startled. Soon after, he gritted his teeth and took out a jade strip from his bosom. He said, this jade strip contains information about the fire spirit juice. If you can help me kill Longwen, I will give you the information about the fire spirit juice. What? Fire spirit juice? Pan Hua instantly lost his calm. It was said that the fire spirit juice could increase the chances of advancing to the true god realm. It had unimaginable benefits for peak heavenly deities and fake true gods. Moreover, this item was extremely rare. It was a divine item that was priceless in the market. Once it was put on sale, it would basically be snatched up. Now this panda actually knew where to find the fire spirit juice. Young Master Panda, give me the jade strip. I will think of a way to kill Longwen. Pan Hua asked with a blazing gaze. Panda smiled and threw the jade strip to Pan Hua, saying, "Take a look. This time, the fire spirit juice is related to Long One." It is said that Xiang Mengchun from the Great Accord invited the 4 Vice-Star Lords to Blazing Cloud region to retrieve the fire spirit juice. I'm afraid that the reason why Xiang Mengchun is protecting Long One is related to the fire spirit juice. I'm afraid that she might even bring Long One to Blazing Cloud region. Pan Hua took the jade strip and glanced at the contents. He was getting more and more excited. He said, "Since Xiang Mengchun needs to use Long One, it's not easy to kill him now. However, after Long One is used up, Xiang Mengchun won't meddle in other people's business." Panda nodded and waved his hand. Pan Hua left. Obviously, he planned to stay in the Long River Galaxy to look for the fire spirit juice. 1.5 months later, Zhuowen's injuries were almost healed. It was actually thanks to the effect of the snow ginseng pill that Xiang Mengchun gave him. Moreover, Xiaohe had completely merged with the Thunder Fire Sword. Although he wasn't sure how strong Xiaohe could be, from Xiaohe's proud expression, he could tell that it wasn't weak. At the same time, Zhuowen had also mastered the 4th move of the Destruction Dao sword art. The power of this sword move was stronger than it was a month ago. Zhuowen took out the Iron Lu sword and carried it on his back. Then he walked out of the room. Outside the courtyard, Xiang Mengchun was looking at him with a smile. In the starry sky outside the Long River Galaxy, a slender rainbow flew over and stopped outside the Long River Galaxy. Upon closer inspection, the rainbow was an extremely luxurious flying ship, a divine artifact. 8 figures stood on the deck of the flying ship. 4 of the figures stood proudly at the bow of the ship, while the other 4 stood behind. They should be the subordinates of the 4 figures in front. An old man with a red face looked at the man in black armor beside him and said, "And Xiulan, I heard that 1.5 months ago, your soul was severely injured by a demigod? How could you be so careless?" The black-armored and Xiulan looked at the old man with a gloomy gaze and said, "Huashang, since when did you care so much? What does it have to do with you whether my soul is injured or not?" Huashang smiled faintly and said, "Of course it doesn't matter. I'm just curious. As the Dark Star's Star Lord, how could you be injured by a mere demigod? I always thought that it was just a rumor. Looks like it isn't. That guy isn't simple. If I'm not wrong, he should have a very powerful aura concealment technique. His true strength is above the peak of the Sky God stage, close to the pseudo-true God stage." And Xiulan said faintly. The white-haired woman looked at Xiulan and said, "This is the first time I've heard someone like Xiulan praise someone." And Xiulan said coldly, "I'll find that person and kill him with my own hands." "Stop arguing. Xiang Mengchun is here." The tall man who had been silent suddenly spoke. Huashang, the white-haired woman, and Xiulan all fell silent and looked at the tall man with fear. At this moment, Xiang Mengchun landed on the deck with Zhuowen and said with a smile, "I've made the 4 Star Lords wait. Mengchun has sinned." Zhuowen, who was standing beside Xiang Mengchun, looked at the 4 people in front of him. He naturally knew Xiulan, and Xiang Mengchun had already introduced the other 3 to him. The red-faced old man was Mars Star Lord Huashang, the white-haired woman was Lunar Star Lord Taishang Shui, and the taciturn tall man was King Star Lord Han Wang. It has to be mentioned that King Star Master Han Wang is the most powerful of the 4 Vice Star Masters. The other 3 Vice Star Masters are extremely wary of him. Demigod? Pavilion Lord Xiang, can the person you brought really come in handy? Han Wang noticed Zhuowen beside Xiang Mengchun and frowned. Xiang Mengchun waved her hand and said, "Don't worry. Although Long Wen's cultivation is weak, his divine sense is extremely powerful. He's also very good at illusions. In the Grace Pavilion, he used illusions to confuse 2 mid-sky god stage cultivators." Zhuowen sighed in relief. Fortunately, he didn't use illusions on the Dark Star. Otherwise, Xiulan would definitely be suspicious. Confuse 2 mid-sky god stage cultivators? Not bad. Han Wang looked at Zhuowen and didn't say anything else. Xiulan, on the other hand, kept looking at Zhuowen, as if she was trying to find something special about him. "Xiulan, could it be that the one who injured your divine sense is this little demigod?" Huashang suddenly said in a strange tone. Xiulan snorted and said, This person's aura is completely different. It's not him. Last time, that person wasn't good at illusions either. No need to argue. This time, we're going to the burning cloud region for the fire spirit juice. Everyone needs to work together. Otherwise, no one will be able to enter the burning cloud region. Han Wang said solemnly. With Han Wang's words, no one said anything else. Then the ship started and left the Long River Star. Not long after the ship left, Pan Hu stood on his astrolabe and silently followed behind the ship. Pan Hu was very careful. The distance between him and the ship was very large. Even with the powerful divine sense of a false true god, it was difficult to detect him following behind. Half a month later, the ship arrived at the burning cloud region in the southern part of the Long River Star system. So this is the burning cloud region. Zhuowen stood on the deck and looked at the huge region in front of him that looked like the burning cloud region. This region was very large, and it was filled with stars. Moreover, magma flowed around these stars as if they were on fire. It looked very strange. The burning cloud region is an extremely dangerous place. This region is made up of terrifying stars. The deeper you go, the more stars there are. The stars are also very powerful. Ordinary heavenly gods will die if they enter. A cold voice sounded. Zhuowen turned around and saw an ordinary-looking woman walk to Zhuowen's side. Zhuowen had some impression of this woman. She was following behind Taishang Shui. She must have been brought here by Taishang Shui. Although she was only an early-stage heavenly god, Zhuowen could feel that her soul was much stronger than ordinary heavenly gods. In other words, the cultivators brought by the 4-star lords all had powerful souls and knew how to use illusions. Perhaps they would need to use illusions to enter the burning cloud region. You're only a demigod. The chances of you dying in the burning cloud region are too high. You still dare to come. I don't know what to say. The woman looked at Zhuowen indifferently and left. Clearly, she didn't want to say anything to Zhuowen. What's your name? Although the woman's attitude wasn't very good, Zhuowen knew that she was reminding him. However, she didn't seem to be good at expressing herself, so she looked a little cold. Chapter 1933. Jiang Yanzhuo silently glanced at the back of the woman who had left. Then he shook his head and ignored her. With his current strength, if entering the fiery cloud region was courting death, then wouldn't the other cultivators below the true god realm be dead for sure? However, Zhuowen did not explain. This time, he planned to refine the 9 stars in the fiery cloud region. After advancing to the heavenly god realm, he planned to leave the Long River Galaxy and bring the heavenly armor star to the Great Brahma domain. Near the fiery cloud region, there were many floating meteorite continents. These continents were filled with many cultivators, and there were simple tents set up as simple shops to sell all kinds of things. Little brother Long One, these meteorite continents are the temporary gathering places of the fiery cloud region. Many cultivators will sell the useless things they obtain in the fiery cloud region here. At the same time, many cultivators will rest on the meteorite continents or prepare materials to enter the fiery cloud region. Xiang Mengchun said with a smile. At this moment, the spaceship had already landed on the nearest meteorite continent. Then, a group of people walked out of the spaceship. The temperature of the fiery cloud region is too terrifying. If you want to go deep, ordinary ice attribute pills won't have much effect. You have to buy the deep freeze ice jade here. After King Han finished speaking, he led everyone to the center of the continent. Here there stood a tall cylindrical tower. King Han entered the tower alone and negotiated for a while, then came out again with 8 pieces of white jade in his hand and distributed them to everyone. Zhuowen took the white jade and discovered that it was actually emitting a dense cold qi. This cold qi was extremely unusual. After coming into contact with his skin, it actually penetrated deep into his meridians and adhered to the surface of his meridians. Let's go in. After distributing the deep freeze ice jades, Han Wang said, then led the 7 of them and rushed towards the burning cloud region ahead. There were many passages around the fiery cloud region. People were coming in and out of these passages, and it was quite lively. Bang! Suddenly, a cultivator who came out of the passage fell to the ground. This person's face was extremely red, and his eyes were bloodshot. His expression was extremely painful. Ah! The person got up and walked a few steps. Suddenly he screamed. Flames emerged from his body and he was burned to ashes. The fire poison in this person's body was too strong, and he burned himself to death. Han Wang coldly glanced at the cultivator, who burned himself to death. There was no pity in his eyes. And Xiulan, Taishangxue, and Huashang were also used to it. Little brother Long One, you're weaker than me. Later, when we enter the fiery cloud domain, follow me closely. Also, when we enter the fiery cloud domain, don't use the deep freeze ice jade yet. First use the ice soul pill I gave you. After you finish the ice soul pill, use the deep freeze ice jade. Zhuowen nodded and silently followed behind Xiang Mengchun. From the expressions of King Han and the others, he could tell that they were extremely familiar with this place. It was probably not their first time in the fiery cloud region. Since they had been here before, but did not obtain the fire spirit juice, it should have something to do with the illusion they needed. Go in. Han Wang skillfully chose a passage, and then the group of 10 people entered the passage. As soon as they entered the passage, a terrifying heat wave hit them in the face. The unbearably high temperature instantly spread to everyone's hearts. Han Wang, the 4 Star Lords and Xiang Mengchun were fine, but the few people they brought were not as good. They all blushed. Although this heat wave did not affect Zhuowen, Zhuowen did not want to attract attention. Naturally, he acted even more unbearably. He even took out the ice soul pill and consumed it. The woman behind Tai Shangxue was also resisting the heat wave. However, when she saw Zhuowen immediately taking the ice soul pill, she secretly shook her head. She knew that this time, Longwen would definitely die in the fiery cloud region. After walking out of the passage, a terrifying sea of fire spread over. Moreover, this sea of fire was accompanied by rolling magma. In just an instant, the surrounding temperature increased by hundreds and thousands. The rest of the people also took the ice soul pill and began to move forward in this sea of fire. Xiang Mengchun took good care of Zhuowen. While walking in the sea of fire, she would often take care of Zhuowen and resist most of the fire waves. Zhuowen passed through the sea of fire and found that they were actually walking between stars. Therefore, the sea of fire and magma accompanied this passage. This fiery cloud region was extremely strange. Not only were there stars, but the distance between stars was also extremely small. This also made it extremely difficult to walk in this fiery cloud region. The temperature of 1 star was already very terrifying. If 2 or even 3 stars were separated in the surroundings, the temperature release would be really terrifying. Ordinary divine realm experts would not be able to withstand it. No wonder there were people who were burned to death by fire poison. Moreover, Zhuowen also found that as they went deeper into the fiery cloud region, the quality of the stars became higher and higher, and the temperature became more and more terrifying. In the beginning, the stars were still somewhat dark red. However, as they went deeper, the stars began to glow golden and became purer. Zhuowen knew that stars were also divided into strong and weak. Since he wanted to refine 9 stars, he naturally had to choose the 9 stars with the highest quality and the largest energy in this fiery cloud region. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After walking for about half a day, a sea of fire appeared in front of them. The sea of fire rolled. Pairs of fiery red eyes actually appeared in the sea of fire. Everyone be careful. There are fiery eyes Swanni in this sea of fire. They are extremely fast. Be careful not to be caught and dragged into the sea. King Han reminded. After that, he waved his sleeve and took out a scepter. He used his star divine energy to activate the scepter's power. A light blue light barrier surrounded King Han and the people he brought. The rest of the people also took out their divine artifacts to protect the cultivators they brought. Xiang Mengchun took out a green pearl. This pearl was overflowing with green. As soon as it was taken out, there was a cool breeze that hit him in the face. It was as if he was under the shade of a towering tree at this moment. This is a true god artifact. Zhuowen looked up and down at the pearl that Xiang Mengchun took out. His eyes revealed a hint of surprise. He had seen a true god artifact before. This green pearl's aura was much stronger than a divine artifact. It was definitely a true god artifact. After Xiang Mingchen took out the pearl, King Han, and Xiulan, Huashang and Taishang Shui all looked at Xiang Mingchen with fear in their eyes. Zhuowen finally knew the main reason why Xiang Mingchen, a mere peak heavenly god, had the right to speak in front of the four-star lords. It was probably related to the true god weapon. Pass through this sea of fire quickly. You must follow me closely. It will be troublesome if you lose me, King Han said in a deep voice. Then he waved his sleeve and quickly rushed into the sky above the sea of fire. After that, and Xiulan, Huashang and the others followed closely behind. Xiang Mingchen was the last to depart. The moment the group appeared above the sea of fire, the pairs of eyes hidden in the sea of fire suddenly burst out with blazing light. Then vigorous figures broke out of the water and charged towards the 10 of them. The strange beasts that came out of the sea of fire looked like lions. Their eyes were filled with fire. They were the fiery-eyed Swanee that King Han mentioned. The fiery-eyed Swanee's strength was around the mid-divine stage. However, the number of fiery-eyed Swanee that came out of the sea of fire was terrifying. They were densely packed like clouds of fire. When King Han and the others saw the terrifying number of fiery-eyed Swanee, their faces became more serious. As for the people that they brought, their faces were even paler. They weren't strong and were much weaker than King Han and the others. If they were surrounded by the fiery-eyed Swanee, they would definitely die. The 10 of them were extremely fast. They instantly passed through the sea of fire. However, when they reached the second half of the sea of fire, the number of fiery-eyed Swanee increased. Their speed suddenly decreased. King Han, and Xiulan and the others used all their skills. However, the fiery-eyed Swanee fell from the sky like raindrops. Bang! Suddenly, a hole appeared in the light barrier around Taishang Shui. A fiery-eyed Swanee reached out with its right hand and pulled the woman out of Taishang Shui's light barrier. The woman's eyes were filled with fear. She quickly took out a flying sword and slashed at the fiery-eyed Swanee. Unfortunately, her strength was weaker than the fiery-eyed Swanee. The flying sword didn't cause much damage to the fiery-eyed Swanee. Instead, it angered the fiery-eyed Swanee. "Save me!" the woman shouted at Taishang Shui. Unfortunately, Taishang Shui couldn't even take care of herself right now. She simply couldn't spare any time to save this woman. Seeing that Taishang Shui was indifferent, the woman's eyes were filled with despair. However, just as the woman was about to be pulled out by the fiery-eyed Swanee, a sword light suddenly swept over and cut off the fiery-eyed Swanee's right hand. The woman reacted quickly and immediately went back into the light barrier. At this moment, Taishang Shui also healed the light barrier in time. When the woman saw Zhuowen put away the Tielu sword, her eyes were filled with shock and gratitude. Never did she expect that at the moment when she was in the most despair, it was the demigod cultivator that she thought to possess the weakest strength that saved her. Zhuowen's attack naturally attracted the attention of the others. When they saw that the Tielu sword in Zhuowen's hand was actually a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, they all revealed astonished expressions. However, that was all there was to it. A high-quality heavenly divine artifact was extremely powerful. Cutting off the arm of the fiery-eyed Swanee, who was only a mid-heavenly deity, could not be considered to be a difficult matter. It was instead a dark cultivator Randolph who took a glance at Zhuowen. Although it was the first time he saw the Tielu sword in Zhuowen's hand, he discovered a trace of familiarity from the way Zhuowen attacked with the sword. After blocking this wave of attacks, the group of people finally arrived at the other side of the Sea of Flames. At this moment, there was no Sea of Flames on the other side. Instead, there were fiery red-colored rocks on the ground, and before them was an enormous rock gate. This rock gate was undecorated and full of bumps and hollows. Evidently, it was formed naturally. At this moment, Han Wang and the others all stopped. Zhuowen was able to see that Han Wang, a dark cultivator Randolph and the others had serious expressions on their faces. In fact, within their serious expressions, there was even a trace of fear. "My name is Jiang Yan. Thank you for saving me earlier." The woman with an ordinary appearance suddenly arrived beside Zhuowen and said in a soft voice, "I just so happened to see you. I couldn't just leave you to die. If it wasn't for the high-quality heavenly divine artifact that I gifted to the pavilion master, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to help you." Chapter 1934. Undercurrent. After passing through this stone door, we'll reach the deepest part of the fiery cloud region. However, there's a true god-level giant beast behind the stone door. Even if we join hands, we can only barely stop it. Han Wang suddenly spoke. He turned around and looked at the 5 cultivators he brought with him. However, this giant beast only has brute force, but its divine soul isn't that strong. The 5 of you are proficient in illusion techniques, so I hope that the 5 of you can help us restrain this giant beast. After Han Wang said that, Jiang Yan and the others' faces turned ugly. They didn't think that Han Wang invited them here to confuse a true god-level giant beast. Such a terrifying existence only needed to wave its claws to kill any one of them. Lord Han Wang, you didn't say that before. This true god-level giant beast isn't something we can provoke. I want to withdraw now. A man with a crooked nose cupped his hands at King Han with a gloomy gaze, then retreated. Zhuo knew this man. He was the one Han Wang brought with him. His name was Ji Chao, and his cultivation base wasn't bad. He's a mid-heavenly god. As soon as Ji Chao finished speaking, Jiang Yan and the others also showed signs of retreating. Han Wang's eyes were calm. He didn't care about the retreating Ji Chao. His right hand clawed, and a terrifying energy exploded in the air. Ji Chao groaned and fell to the ground, his body trembling. Since you've come here, do you think you can still leave? You can rest assured, we're not sending you to your deaths. We're giving you a good fortune. Once you help us restrain that giant beast, when we come out, we'll give you a portion of the fire spirit juice. Han Wang continued. The other 3 people who originally had thoughts of retreating all revealed fervent expressions. The man with the sharp nose stood up and stood to the side with a gloomy expression. He didn't say anything. All right, we're going to open the stone door now. If any of you try to escape while we're dealing with the behemoth, you'll be hunted by the 4 Star Lords in the future. You'd better think about the severity of the consequences. Han Wang added as he signaled to An Xiulan and the others. Then, the 5 of them arrived in front of the stone door. Zhuowen stood there silently. Ever since he came to the other side, Xiang Mengchun, who was originally polite to him, had become a stranger and a little indifferent. After pondering for a moment, Zhuowen transmitted his voice to Xiang Mengchun. Pavilion Master Xiang, can I have a share of the fire essence juice as well? Xiang Mengchun glanced at Zhuowen and replied, if you perform well, I can give you a share. But if you want to run away, you'd better think about the consequences. After all, you're not alone. After that, Xiang Mengchun ignored Zhuowen and opened the gate with King Han and the other Star Lords. Zhuowen was silent, but a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. Xiang Mengchun dared to threaten him with the people of the heavenly armor planet. This had touched Zhuowen's bottom line. It had to be said that Xiang Mengchun was extremely scheming. Zhuowen couldn't tell that Xiang Mengchun was faking her previous attitude, but now that they were in the fiery cloud territory, she probably felt that Zhuowen couldn't run away, so she didn't bother to smile at him. The good impression he originally had towards Xiang Mengchun in his heart had already vanished into thin air at this moment. Long One, you don't have to worry about Pavilion Master Xiang's attitude. When Tai Shang Shui invited me, she was very enthusiastic and even promised a lot. Now that we're here, she doesn't even bother to pay attention to me. Her attitude is even colder. Jiang Yin came to Zhuowen's side. He guessed that Zhuowen had transmitted his voice to Xiang Mengchun, so he softly advised. Zhuowen smiled and said, Miss Jiang, don't worry. This Long's words don't carry much weight, so I won't act rashly. It's just that I feel that King Han's words aren't that simple, so it's best to be careful when we meet that giant beast later. Jiang Yin nodded. She also felt that the following things wouldn't be so simple, so she was secretly vigilant. Rumble. With a rumbling sound, the stone gate in front of them slowly opened. Then, a heat wave more terrifying than the one here roared. There were even blazing flames in this heat wave, which looked extremely strange and terrifying. When the heat wave hit them, Jiang Yan's face turned red, and she quickly took out the deep freeze ice jade. Not only Jiang Yan, Ji Chao and the other 3 also took out their deep freeze ice jades, and Zhuowen was no exception. Roar. What followed was a terrifying roar. And then a terrifying giant hand that covered the sky reached out from the stone gate. grabbing at King Han and the other four who opened the stone gate. The hand was surrounded by raging flames, and these flames weren't dark red, but golden, looking extremely dazzling. "Block it!" King Han roared, and took out the scepter in his hand. The light blue light screen was like the sharpest blade, fiercely slamming into the flaming giant hand. Dark Cultivation Lawn took out a giant pair of scissors. Huashang took out a long spear that spewed out dark blue flames. Taishangxue took out a long sword with snowflakes dancing in the air. And Xiang Mengchun took out the true god tool Green Pearl. With the five of them working together, their power wasn't any weaker than the flaming giant hand. With a rumble, the flaming giant hand was blocked by the five of them. Rumble. Suddenly, the sound of four hooves stomping on the ground came from behind the stone gate, and this sound was getting louder and louder. Then, a giant shadow suddenly broke open the space behind the stone gate, and appeared on the shore of the Sea of Fire. Zhuowen then saw clearly that the flaming giant beast that appeared in front of the stone gate was 1,000 feet tall, with 2 pairs of horns on its head, and its appearance was similar to a water buffalo. With every step it took, the entire ground shook 3 times, and the aura on its body was as terrifying as the ocean. However, this flaming giant beast was bound by chains, and after the beast rushed out of the stone gate, it was immediately forced to stop. Obviously, the chains imprisoned it in place, and it couldn't move forward. Use illusion techniques to confuse it. King Han immediately shouted to the 5 people behind him, and then brought Dark Cultivation Lawn, Huashang, Taishangxue, and Xiang Mengchun to retreat. "King Han, remember your promise." The hook-nosed man, Ji Chao, coldly snorted, and immediately opened his eyes, immediately using illusion techniques. With Ji Chao taking the lead, Jiang Yan and the other 2 also used their illusion techniques. Zhuowen didn't fall behind, but he only suppressed his divine sense to mid-heavenly god level to release illusion techniques. 5 illusion techniques instantly swept out and bombarded the flaming giant beast. King Han wasn't wrong. This flaming giant beast's divine sense wasn't very strong, and after the 5 illusion techniques bombarded it, the flaming giant beast immediately fell into a sluggish state. King Han's eyes flashed, and with a kick of his right foot, like a stream of light, he instantly rushed through the gap between the flaming giant beast and the stone gate. Dark Cultivation Lawn, Huashang, Taishangxue, and Xiang Mengchun followed closely behind, all of them taking out their divine tools, and quickly rushed through the gap between the flaming giant beast and the stone gate. The hook-nosed man, Ji Chao, hesitated, gritted his teeth, and decisively gave up on continuing to use illusion techniques, and then with a kick of his right foot, he rushed towards the gap between the flaming giant beast. "Ji Chao, you!" Jiang Yan immediately guessed Ji Chao's intention, and couldn't help but shout in shock and anger. The 5 of them joined forces to use illusion techniques, and barely managed to control the flaming giant beast. Once Ji Chao left, it would be difficult for the rest of them to control the flaming giant beast. Sure enough, the moment Ji Chao rushed towards the gap, the flaming giant beast that was originally trapped in illusion roared, and its originally confused eyes gradually became clear. Boom! The flaming giant beast looked at the incoming Ji Chao in confusion, and casually slapped out with its right palm. Ji Chao was scared out of his wits. He didn't expect the flaming giant beast to wake up so quickly, and hurriedly stopped and turned around to escape. Pung! Unfortunately, the difference between Ji Chao and the flaming giant beast was too big, and the flaming giant beast's palm smashed Ji Chao into pieces, and he couldn't be more dead. With Ji Chao's death, the flaming giant beast immediately woke up, and then roared towards the sky, and a strong sound wave spread out, causing Jiang Yan and the other 2 to spit out a mouthful of blood, their faces pale. So, at the same time, the flaming giant beast's right foot stomped, and actually jumped out of the stone gate, rushing towards the shore. What's going on? This flaming giant beast is clearly bound by chains. How can it jump out of the stone gate? Jiang Yan's face was pale, and she couldn't believe it and muttered in a low voice. Poochie! The flaming giant beast's speed was too fast, and in an instant, it was in front of the 4 of them, and with a palm strike, monstrous flames surged out, magnificent and magnificent. It's over. Jiang Yan closed her beautiful eyes, She knew that this flaming giant beast was too terrifying, and she couldn't escape. She was dead for sure. But soon, she found that her waist was hugged by a thick and strong arm, and then suddenly rose into the air. Boom! The flaming giant beast's palm strike came down, and the other two were instantly smashed into powder, while Zhuowen carried Jiang Yan and flew to the other side. His eyes became extremely serious. Long Wen Yu. Jiang Yan opened her eyes, and immediately saw that the one hugging her was Long Wen, and her beautiful face blushed, but soon she knew that Long Wen was saving her. This fiery cloud region is not suitable for you. I'll bring you out of here first. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the flaming giant beast. He was very clear that the chains of the flaming giant beast were most likely broken by one of the 5 who entered. Or maybe all 5 of them broke it together, and their goal was to borrow the flaming giant beast's hand to kill them. If the 5 of them died here, when Han Wang and the rest got the flaming spirit juice, there would be no need to give them an extra share. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with killing intent. Han Wang and the rest were too despicable. The 5 of them had already done a lot to hold back the flaming giant beast, and now they wanted to take their lives. You want to bring me out of here? That sea of fire is too terrifying, you. Jiang Yan couldn't react, but the flaming giant beast had already rushed over again. Zhuowen's right leg kicked, and immediately took out the thunderfire sword, and with his right leg stepped on it. His speed was extremely fast, and in an instant he shot into the sea of fire. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the sea of fire, countless flaming eyes stared at Zhuowen and Jiang Yan like tigers watching their prey. Chapter 1935. Innate talent purgatory. Staring at the fiery Iswan and eye that was instantly killed by the black flames, Jiang Yan's jaw dropped. She was so shocked that she was speechless. Big Brother Long, you want to enter the inner region of the fiery cloud region? Jiang Yan was also an intelligent person. Earlier, Zhuowen only said that he would send her back to the other shore, but didn't mention himself. She could already guess that Zhuowen wanted to enter the inner region of the fiery cloud region. Not only that, from the strength Zhuowen displayed, Jiang Yan naturally wouldn't treat Zhuowen as a demigod. Zhuowen nodded. I came to the fiery cloud region this time because I have something to do. Hence, I have to enter the inner region. Jiang Yan's beautiful eyes flickered. Gritting her teeth, she took out a jade slip and passed it to Zhuowen. Big Brother Zhua, this jade slip records an ancient ruin in the inner region of the fiery cloud region. This ancient ruin contains the inheritance of a supreme void heavenly expert. My daughter is incompetent and is unable to enter the inner region of the fiery cloud region. I can only pass it to Big Brother Zhua. Zhuowen received the jade slip and stared at Jiang Yan in astonishment. He didn't expect that Jiang Yan would have such a jade slip on her. Big Brother Long must be very puzzled. This jade slip isn't obtained by me, but was passed down by my ancestor. Back then, my Jiang clan also had a false true god ancestor. This ancestor would often roam the fiery cloud region. Under a lucky coincidence, he managed to find this jade slip in a market outside the fiery cloud region. As she spoke until here, Jiang Yan's beautiful eyes dimmed. Unfortunately, in order to search for the ancient ruin, my ancestor entered the fiery cloud region alone. In the end, his whereabouts were unknown. This time, I came here because I wanted to rely on Taishang Shui to enter the fiery cloud region to search for him. However, I didn't expect that Taishang Shui and the others. Zhuowen kept the jade slip and calmly asked, Miss Jiang, I won't accept this jade slip for nothing. If what's recorded in this jade slip is true, what do you want? Zhuowen was very clear that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Since Jiang Yan had handed over this jade slip to him, it was definitely not for free. Hearing Zhuowen mention it, Jiang Yan's heart relaxed. She was most afraid that Zhuowen would take the jade slip for himself and not give her any remuneration. Luckily, she had been in contact with Zhuowen during this period of time and knew that Zhuowen wasn't an ungrateful person. Hence, she decided to try her luck and take out the jade slip. If Brother Long can enter the ancient ruins, can you give me the fire spirit juice and God's fire spark? Also, if we can find the remains of my ancestor, I hope we can bring him back. His name is Jiang Su. Jiang Yan asked with uncertainty. Zhuowen pondered for a moment and nodded. All right. At this moment, Zhuowen had already stepped on the Thunderfire sword and passed through the Sea of Fire, landing on the other side of the Sea of Fire. Miss Jiang, please leave this place first and wait for me on the meteorite land outside. I will look for you when I come out. After speaking, Zhuowen once again stepped on the Thunderfire sword and transformed into a rainbow as he returned. That terrifying flame beast no longer chased after him after reaching the shore. It was as if the Sea of Fire was a forbidden area for this flame beast, not daring to casually enter. When Zhuowen stepped on the Thunderfire sword and returned, the flame beast's eyes flashed with a tyrannical light as it abruptly blasted towards Zhuowen. This flame beast's strength was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen couldn't be bothered to tangle with it. He circulated the entirety of his divine soul and executed the illusory technique from the shapeless world. The flame beast's body froze, while Zhuowen transformed into a rainbow as he instantly entered through the stone door. Behind the stone door, there was an extremely vast passageway. Not only that, this passageway shone with a golden light, extremely bright. A wave of temperature, even more terrifying than the temperature outside the stone door, gushed in. Zhuowen's speed was extremely fast, and in an instant, he arrived at the end of the passageway. He saw that at the end of the passageway, there was actually a golden star suspended in midair. This star was definitely stronger than any star that Zhuowen had encountered along the way. Zhuowen was very clear that this star was considered powerful even in the fiery cloud region. Moreover, he also discovered that this star's interior was actually tied up with chains. Zhuowen knew that the flame beast should be tied up in this star. This star's terrifying weight caused the flame beast's range of movement to become very small. However, the chains that were derived from the star's interior had already been completely shattered. It should have been destroyed by Han Wang and the other four. Outside the passageway, there was a dark starry sky. There weren't many stars in the starry sky here, and there were even fewer than before. However, Zhuowen discovered that the star's mass and energy here were far more terrifying than the ones outside. And the star that bound the flame beast in front of him was much stronger than the other stars here. Han Wang and Xiulan and the other four had already disappeared. Zhuowen knew that they should have gone to look for the Fire God Essence Juice. Now Zhuowen wasn't too worried that they would find the Fire God Essence Juice. This was because according to Jiang Yan's Jade Slip, the Fire God Essence Juice was mainly stored in the ancient ruins. It wouldn't be easy to enter the ancient ruins. At least, Zhuowen didn't think that Han Wang and Xiulan and the other four would be able to enter the depths of the ancient ruins so quickly. Now that Zhuowen's strength was too weak, he planned to advance to the heavenly god realm in this starry sky. Roar. Within the passageway, the flame beast's roar suddenly sounded. Zhuowen knew that the flame beast had awakened from the illusion and was angry out of humiliation. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a demonic light, and then his body began to expand. In an instant, he transformed from a human body into a huge infant devourer. The infant devourer's body was even more terrifying than the flame beast. Although its aura was weaker than the flame beast, it had the terrifying aura of a superior being. Roar. Devourer roared all of a sudden. As soon as his roar echoed, it reverberated through the entire sky. The stars around him shook hard, and the passageway in front of him exploded. Swoosh. Swoosh. As soon as the flame beast got out of the passageway, it was shaken by Devour's roar. It could feel the endless prestige and power of that roar. The flaming beast looked at Devour in fright, retreating continuously. Although its aura was more intimidating than Devour's innate aura of a superior being was enough to suppress it, leaving it with less than 10% of its power. Devour roared one more time. The flame beast thudded, kneeling on the ground as it submitted to Devour. Zhuowen looked at the flame beast indifferently. He knew that in front of Devour's aura, the flame beast couldn't do anything. Devour glided to the most dazzling star. Then, the heaven-devouring eye opened. Terrifying purple-black lightning bolts shot out, covering the star in just a blink of an eye. At this moment, Zhuowen didn't reserve anything. He was using the adult Devour's energy in the heaven-devouring eye to urge the purple-black lightning bolts. He understood that if he wanted to refine a star, he had to use all of his power. Otherwise he would fail easily. Zhuowen spent half a day to make the purple-black lightning bolt cover the star completely. Then Devour swallowed the star. A black vortex appeared in his mouth, and the star was swallowed directly into the void space inside his body. Seeing Devour swallow the star that had trapped it, the flaming beast was more frightened. Then Zhuowen used the same method, using the purple-black lightning bolts as a medium to wrap the star and swallow it into his body. After devouring the 9 stars, Zhuowen felt his entire body burning. It was as if his internal organs were being set on fire. It was extremely uncomfortable. At this moment, Zhuowen released all of the adult Devour's energy in the heaven-devouring eye to help Devour refine the 9 stars in his body. As he refined the 9 stars, Devour's aura skyrocketed, breaking through the demigod realm and reaching the early heavenly god realm. Not only that, but his aura was still rising, from the early heavenly god realm to the middle heavenly god realm. Eventually, it stopped at the late heavenly god realm. The moment Devour opened his eyes, he faced the sky and roared. The other stars in the starry sky shivered as if they were afraid of Devour. The flame beast knelt on all fours, lowering its head. It didn't dare to look at Devour. Devour's aura was too terrifying. It was even stronger than an ordinary true god realm's aura. Devour's eyes revealed a satisfied look. He knew that the reason why he could advance so quickly was because of the adult Devour's energy. If it weren't for the support of the adult Devour's vast energy, it would be almost impossible for Zhuowen to reach the late heavenly god realm. He was clear that Devour was different from ordinary cultivators. The energy required for each advancement was hundreds or thousands of times more than ordinary cultivators. It could be said that Devour was a terrifying glutton, worthy of being called one of the strongest races in the starry sky. This Devour is too terrifying. He's just a late heavenly god, but he makes me feel like I've met a true god twice. Calamity. Xiao He sat on the Thunderfire sword, looking at Zhuowen in amazement. After successfully advancing to the heavenly god realm, Devour's huge body kept shrinking. Finally, under the effect of the shapeless all-life, he turned into a black-robed young man. This black-robed young man was naturally Zhuowen. Kid, you should have used up all the energy of the adult Devour, right? I'm afraid the road to advancement will be full of thorns. Xiao He said with a frown. Zhuowen nodded and said, I know. My main body is too weak, and I need more strength to take Heavenly Armor Star and the others away. That's why I've cultivated Devour first. However, after this trip to the Long River Galaxy, I'll cultivate my main body again. Moreover, Devour's innate ability is extremely terrifying. After advancing to the heavenly god realm, Devour's innate ability appeared in his inherited memories. Xiao He's eyes flashed with surprise. What kind of innate ability is that? Zhuowen smiled and waved his sleeve. Suddenly, the starry sky within a radius of 10 million miles around him collapsed. Then countless ferocious-looking refined souls appeared from the collapsed space. Oh! The instant the purgatory behemoth appeared, a look of terror appeared in its eyes as it trembled. The purgatory behemoth's strength was actually being taken away by the purgatory behemoth, while Zhuowen's strength was increasing exponentially. The moment the refined souls appeared, Xiao He felt a chill run down her spine. She could feel the energy in her body gradually draining away. Moreover, this kind of draining couldn't be stopped. Xiao He could only slow it down. Chapter 1936. Ancient Ruins. What a terrifying innate ability. Xiao He's eyes were filled with fear. Based on this terrifying innate ability alone, even an ordinary true god of 2 disasters might not be Zhuowen's match. It's time to take a look at the ancient ruins. Zhuowen smiled faintly and waved at the flame beast at the end of the tunnel. The flame beast whimpered and rushed to Zhuowen's feet, bowing down to show its submission. Whoosh! The moment the flame beast reached Zhuowen's side, a figure suddenly rushed out from the tunnel ahead. It was a tall man with a long blade on his back. He had just rushed out of the tunnel when he saw Zhuowen, and his eyes revealed a hint of ferocity. However, this person quickly noticed the flame beast beside Zhuowen, and his face turned pale, not daring to approach. Zhuowen's eyes were sharp, and he immediately noticed the ferocity in the man's eyes when he saw him. Obviously, this person knew him, but Zhuowen did not. Zhuowen stepped onto the flame beast casually, looked at the tall man and said, "Who are you?" When Zhuowen stepped onto the flame beast, the tall man's body trembled, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Then he slowly retreated. "Retreat!" he shouted and immediately retreated, but he was cursing in his heart. How did Long One, a mere demigod, manage to tame a true god-level flame beast? When the tall man immediately retreated, Zhuowen realized that something was wrong. He coldly snorted, pointed at the tall man and said to the flame beast, "Capture him alive." The flame beast roared and instantly disappeared into the tunnel. After a while, it arrived in front of Zhuowen with the battered man in its mouth. At this moment, the tall man was dying, and his eyes were dazed. This tall man's cultivation was not weak, and he had reached the level of a false true god. If it was before becoming a heavenly god, Zhuowen would have a hard time dealing with this person. But now he could crush this person to death with one hand. Don't kill me." When the tall man saw Zhuowen in front of him, he exclaimed in horror. "You're right." Zhuowen couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the tall man. His right hand formed a claw and pinched the man's head, immediately searching his soul. After advancing to the late heavenly god realm, Zhuowen's god soul had also evolved to the late heavenly god realm. With Devour's power, his god soul had far surpassed the late heavenly god realm. Even a false true god might not be as powerful as Zhuowen's god soul. After searching his soul, Zhuowen destroyed the man's spiritual soul. Then he leaped onto the giant flame beast and said, "Let's go. Let's enter the ancient ruins." This person's name was Pan Hu, and he had come with Han Wang and the others. He had a very high status in the Gold Sun Galaxy, and was also invited by Panda to kill him. Now Panda was simply a jumping clown to him. Originally, Zhuowen didn't want to pay attention to a clown like Panda, but since Panda took the initiative to hit the spearhead, then don't blame Zhuowen for being merciless. Of course, Zhuowen would deal with Panda after they came out of the ancient ruins. The inheritance of a void heaven almighty is just right for this sovereign to inherit. Standing on the giant flame beast, Zhuowen's gaze pierced through the starry sky and landed on the ancient ruins at the end. Whether the ancient ruins were real or not, with Zhuowen's current strength, he didn't fear them at all. The central region of the fiery cloud territory was completely different from the outside. There was a huge ring-shaped region here. There weren't any stars in this region, but the temperature here was much more terrifying than the outside. In the center of this region, there was a huge ancient ruins. There were many dilapidated buildings scattered in this ancient ruins. Moreover, these buildings were all made of fire source crystals. On the surface, it looked as if they had been burned. There really are ancient ruins here. It seems like the information we received wasn't wrong. Some lucky cultivators obtained the fire source essence juice in the outer region. I'm afraid it was leaked from this ancient ruins. After Han Wang and the other four arrived at the central region, their eyes suddenly became blazing. And Xiaolan seemed to have discovered something. She waved her right hand and pinched a ball of flame that swept out. Then, she spread it out and discovered that the ball of flame was actually a palm-sized liquid. However, this liquid was extremely strange. It was wrapped in flames as if the outer layer of flames had become a bag of fire source essence juice. Fire source essence juice, and Xiaolan was excited. She immediately put the fire source essence juice into her spirit ring. At the same time, she stared at the people around her with vigilance. And Xiaolan, you're really useless. The fire source essence juice here isn't just a little bit in your hand. Are we going to ignore the essentials and chase after the trifles and snatch it from you? Huashang sneered. He also waved his sleeve and collected the ball of flame that passed by not far away. Sure enough, it was also a ball of fire source essence juice. With this discovery, the five of them started to collect the fire source essence juice. After about an hour, Han Wang suddenly said, "It's too slow for us to collect it like this. Since this fire source essence juice came from the ancient ruins, we might be able to find the source if we work together." I agree with Han Wang. Xiang Mengchen nodded. Since Han Wang took the lead, and Xiaolan, Taishang Shui, and the others naturally had no objections. The ancient ruins were very big. After the 5 of them landed on a fiery path in the ancient ruins, they started to search. Soon, the 5 of them arrived at a spacious area. They saw a huge flame palace in front of them. However, this flame palace was now extremely dilapidated and on the verge of collapse. What a grand palace! Even a true god might not be able to build such a magnificent palace. And Xiaolan sighed. However, Xiang Mingchun said, "This might be the ancient ruins of a void sky expert. It might contain the inheritance of a void sky expert." The inheritance of a void sky expert. And Xiaolan, Huashang, and Taishang Shui's eyes burned with passion. On the other hand, Han Wang frowned slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. Look, isn't that the pool of fire source essence juice? And Xiaolan suddenly pointed to the side. The other 4 looked over. Indeed, there was a fiery red pool not far from the dilapidated palace. The pool was burning with a fiery red flame that was surging violently. It looked like a wave that was constantly surging. It really is fire source essence juice. Let's go take a look. Han Wang's eyes lit up, and he immediately rushed toward the pool. The other 4 were not to be outdone. There is a restriction around this pool of fire source essence juice. This restriction is very powerful. We can't break it with our strength. After checking the pool, Han Wang's face darkened. The others had similar expressions. Whoosh! Suddenly, a bubble appeared in the fiery red pool. Then, flames wrapped around a bit of fire source essence juice and rushed out of the ancient ruins. Han Wang intercepted the fire source essence juice and sighed. It seems that the fire source essence juice outside is leaking from this pool. And Xiaolan and the others were helpless. They knew that although there were many pools of fire source essence juice, the restriction was too powerful. They could see it but could not touch it. Everyone, this restriction must have been set up by the ancient ruins owner. Since that's the case, why don't we enter the palace and take a look? Perhaps the palace has a way to break the restriction. Xiang Mengchun suddenly smiled sweetly. Pavilion Master Xiang is right. Let's enter the palace and take a look. Huashang quickly replied. And Xiaolan and Tai Shangxue did not have much opinion. Instead, it was Han Wang who frowned. He did not know why, but after entering the ancient ruins he felt uneasy. Han Wang, is there a problem? And Xiaolan noticed Han Wang's expression and asked. Han Wang shook his head. I just feel uneasy. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me. There's only this palace left. Let's go in and take a look. The group of 5 slowly entered the palace. However, the moment they entered the palace, Xiang Mingchuan's mouth revealed a strange arc rumble. A stream of light instantly entered the ancient ruins. Zhuan stood on the fire beast. His gaze fell on the dilapidated buildings in front of him. He asked curiously, "This is the ancient ruins that Jiang Yin mentioned?" The moment they entered the ancient ruins, Zhuan had some doubts. Logically speaking, since the fiery cloud domain existed in the Long River system, and Qi was the master of the system, it was impossible for him to not notice the ancient ruins in the depths of the fiery cloud domain. With the strength of Qi's real body, entering this place should not be too big of a problem. Moreover, taking away the inheritance of the ancient ruins should not be too difficult. However, the fiery cloud domain had existed in the Long River system for such a long time. However, Qi did not do so. This made Zhuan feel that it was strange. Seems like this place is not simple. Zhuan looked around the ancient ruins. However, he was secretly vigilant. He guessed that with Qi's power, he definitely knew that there was an ancient ruins here. Since the ancient ruins still existed in the core region of the fiery cloud domain, there was only one explanation. That was that the ancient ruins were not that easy to take. Even a true god like Qi would find it difficult to take down the ancient ruins. Roar! Suddenly, the fiery beast roared at Zhuan. There was fear in its eyes and it used its right claw to point at the palace in front of it. Its body was shivering as though it was afraid of the palace. Zhuan walked down from the fiery beast and walked towards the palace slowly. At the same time, he took out the thunder fire sword and held the iron Lu sword in his right hand. He was observing the surroundings at all times. Young man, This place is obviously very hot. However, it gives me a feeling that it is a bit gloomy. Xiaohei floated on the thunder fire sword and said with fear in its small eyes. Zhuowen nodded. Very soon, he noticed the pool of fire spirit juice that was not far away. This is fire spirit juice? There is so much of it? Zhuowen stared at the pool in front of him that was a few feet wide. There was quite a lot of fire spirit juice in it. If such a large amount of fire spirit juice were to be released, it would definitely cause countless heaven gods in the entire system to go crazy. Even the cultivators in the surrounding systems would not be calm. There is a prohibition? Zhuowen quickly noticed that there was a transparent light flowing around the pool. It was obvious that there was a strong prohibition around the pool. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.